Coming up on SportsCenter, this afternoon, Mike Tyson was indicted for rape and several other charges. We'll have late reaction. Hello again, everybody, and welcome to SportsCenter. Along with Bill Patrick, I'm Jack Edwards. Mike Tyson is innocent until proven guilty, but his record won't help his defense.
Now, Tyson's been in trouble before, only it has never been this serious, Jack. On November 8th, former champ Mike Tyson is scheduled to fight Evander Holyfield for the heavyweight championship of the world. But now that fight and Tyson's personal future are very much up in the air. Today in Indianapolis, Tyson was indicted by a special grand jury on charges that he allegedly raped an 18-year-old beauty pageant contestant back in July. Tyson was also charged with 2 counts of criminal deviant conduct and 1 count of confinement. The Marion County grand jury began its investigation 4 weeks ago. More than 24 witnesses testified before that panel, including Tyson and his accuser. As the grand jury left the proceedings today, the lawyer for the alleged victim spoke about how she is dealing with this situation.
She continues to live with the nightmare while Mike Tyson continues to promote himself for a multi-million-dollar payday. She's trying to, she wants to go on with her life, and she wants to see that the right thing is done for her and for others.
On August 30th, Tyson appeared in front of the grand jury, and just last week, a press conference was held to promote the upcoming fight.
Mike Tyson and Evander Holyfield made a decision to, and main events and Caesars and TV Guild made a decision to go forward with this fight. Mike Tyson's legal situation has nothing to do with this fight. The fight's on for November 8th. I know that disappoints some people, but the fight is on for November 8th.
Yes, I do. I know it disappoints people, me getting all that money and me winning my title back, but God, thank God for America again.
You must never sell the American people short. They understand that accusation, allegation, indictment is not conviction. You know what I mean? So you got to be able to deal with what is real. I don't think it's going to have any impact other than a few stories that will go out with headlines one way or the other.
By the way, Don King was quoted today as saying, "It is unfortunate that the Marion County grand jury has indicted Mike, but we are confident when all facts are developed, he will be found innocent of all charges." The prosecutor in the case said earlier today that, if indicted, Tyson would be arrested, but then freed on bond. A trial in the case would not be scheduled before the end of the year, which would allow the Holyfield fight to go on as scheduled. Today, Phil Cooper, the Assistant Vice President of Public Relations for Caesars Palace in Las Vegas, said the hotel will proceed as scheduled with the fight, as they are contractually obligated to do. That fight is sold out. By the way, we spoke of Tyson's past problems, which range from being charged with misdemeanor assault and battery, to being accused of striking a parking lot attendant, to being sued for sexual assault and harassment. But we stress he has never been found guilty of any of the above charges.
Eyewitness News in a moment, and coming up, Mike Tyson, we know, can dish it out in the ring. Now he'll have to take it in court. The former heavyweight champion is charged with rape, and we'll have a report. The fight for Staten Island. Good morning, I'm Bill Butel, and welcome to the very late edition of Eyewitness News. Mike Tyson does not treat life gently, and it looks now as if life is trying to get back at him. He's facing what might be the fight of his life. He is charged with raping a beauty queen in Indianapolis in July. The former heavyweight champ faces some very heavyweight charges. 1 count of rape, 2 counts of criminal deviant conduct, 1 count of confinement. All this only weeks before Tyson is scheduled to meet Evander Holyfield in a fight to regain his heavyweight crown. Jim Dolan has more on the story.
With devastating power and an unquenchable thirst for victory in the ring, Mike Tyson was once thought to be an unstoppable champion between the ropes. One after another they fell, little more than well-paid pawns in the plans of a master. But it has not been inside the ring where Tyson has had his problems. There he has been almost invincible. It is when he steps on this side of the ropes, in the real world, where he has had problems. And here those problems have gotten him almost as much publicity as his work inside the ring. One of the first indications of trouble was the bandaged hand suffered in a late-night brawl with former boxer Mitch Blood Green. And from there, the trouble escalated. The rocky marriage with Robin Givens that deteriorated from a network television interview that had Givens saying she feared Tyson, to the night when Tyson crashed her BMW into a tree, an incident some said was a suicide attempt. Tyson denied it. And then there was the book written about Tyson by a former friend, quoting Tyson as saying the best punch he ever threw was at Robin Givens. She flew backward, hitting the wall in the apartment, Tyson is quoted as saying. That was the best punch I ever threw in my life. Later, Tyson was quoted as saying, "I like to hurt women when I make love to them. I like to hear them scream with pain, to see them bleed." Tyson later denied making those statements, but they, along with other allegations from other women, certainly set the stage for today when a grand jury in Indianapolis returned an indictment against Tyson on rape charges.
She continues to live with the nightmare while Mike Tyson continues to promote himself for a multi-million-dollar payday. She's trying to, she wants to go on with her life.
Late this evening, an attorney for Mike Tyson said, "We remain confident of his innocence and look forward to his ultimate vindication." Tyson will next take his savage power and boxing savvy to Nevada for a chance to regain the heavyweight title. Back to the ring, the one place Mike Tyson never seems to get into trouble. Jim Dolan, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
Well, the Nevada State Boxing Commission is investigating the affair and will decide whether to strip Mike Tyson of his boxing license. That, in turn, would prevent Tyson from fighting Holyfield for the title come November.
The boxing news now, and Mike Tyson got the word from Indianapolis Monday, and the word was indictment. An indictment is a grand jury's finding of a reasonable suspicion that a crime may have been committed. Tyson is innocent until proven otherwise, but a Marion County, Indiana grand jury has indicted the former heavyweight champ on four counts: rape, 2 counts of criminal deviant conduct, and 1 count of confinement. All those associated with the Tyson Evander Holyfield title bout say that the fight will take place as scheduled. Bob Lee has more on today's events.
The grand jury that needed only 2 hours of deliberations to indict Mike Tyson heard his testimony 2 weeks ago and the testimony of the alleged victim. Tyson will return to Indianapolis this week to be arrested and then released on $30,000 bond. The charges surround an alleged hotel room assault on a Miss Black America contestant.
That the victim was led to believe that her meeting with Tyson was to be platonic. In fact, however, Tyson intended to have sexual relations with her. When she refused his advances, Tyson had forced non-consensual sex with the victim.
She's trying to heal herself. She's been in counseling. Keep in mind, she continues to live with the nightmare while Mike Tyson continues to promote himself for a multi-million-dollar payday.
Will that payday take place? All parties to the fight say 1,000 times yes. But the Nevada Athletic Commission will meet in an open session to consider Tyson's indictment in light of its moral turpitude clause. Tyson's license to fight could be lifted. ESPN boxing analyst Wally Matthews.
Well, actually, there's very little chance that Nevada would cancel the fight at this point. First of all, although the statute has been on the books for many years, they have never denied a license to a fighter on a moral turpitude charge, and I really doubt they're going to start with this fight, especially since the Tyson-Holyfield fight stands to bring into Las Vegas many, many millions of dollars.
Tyson-Holyfield would be a $100 million event, a pay-per-view bonanza, a live gate worth $13 million, $40 million of casino action over one weekend for Caesars Palace. The fight's promoter today repeated what he said last week.
We've known for 3 or 4 weeks now that there was a distinct possibility that Mike Tyson could get indicted, and our decisions were made based on the assumption that he would.
Duva's rival, promoter Bob Arum, called for the commission to lift Tyson's license. Tyson's meteoric rise from Brooklyn ghetto to world championship has magnified every incident in his private life. An alleged assault on a parking lot attendant 4 years ago was settled out of court for $100,000. A civil jury last year found him guilty of assault on a woman, but assessed only $100 in damages. Tyson's stay in Indianapolis this summer spawned 2 civil lawsuits, one from a beauty queen who claims Tyson fondled her, the other from the pageant director. This, however, is different.
This is by far Mike Tyson's most serious transgression with the law. But if you remember back to June 1988, before he fought Michael Spinks, Tyson was in the midst of a storm of marital troubles, mother-in-law troubles. He was fighting with Bill Caton. And what did he do? He went into the ring and knocked out Michael Spinks in 91 seconds.
Reiterating, all parties, Don King, Dan Duva, and Caesars Palace say the fight is on. Tyson's case would not come to trial until next year, so that would allow the fight to proceed as planned. If Tyson is convicted, he could face 63 years in prison.
Today, Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson pleaded innocent today to charges that he raped a Miss Black America contestant 2 months ago. The former heavyweight champion answered the 4-count indictment in Indianapolis. He will go on trial January 27th, the day after the Super Bowl.
On in America, guys.
Shortly after his court appearance, Tyson faced the media, again maintaining his innocence, professing bewilderment.
And I love women, you know what I mean? My mother's a woman. I respect them as well. And of course, you know what I mean? Every time I trust one and get involved with one in a certain way like this, something happens. So I'm confused. I'm just lost on the whole issue that happened today.
Don King assailed local law enforcement for the pre-indictment publicity.
And it's always been that the grand jury testimony has been secret, but not here. Not here. Every bit of it has been headlines every day. It makes one think about what's really on trial here. What's the agenda here?
A Kentucky newspaper yesterday published the alleged victim's name. Both Tyson and King uttered it several times before the cameras.
Like I said before, knows what happened in the room. I know what happened, and I know I'm innocent.
Put a big banner, you guys out there, and start asking them, what was you doing in the man's room at 2 o'clock in the morning?
We held a press conference so we can respect you guys, so you have to be running all over the place. We're facing you. We're not hiding from you.
I think it's an absolute act of vicious callousness in doing that. I think it's almost hypocritical in that Mike Tyson filed this morning, prior to his press conference in court, a motion for a gag order that they then, 2 hours later, walk out and have a tremendous press conference, apparently in contravention of what they put in court papers, that they're creating a circus atmosphere.
Outside the Indianapolis courthouse, guardian angels protested Tyson's upcoming fight. In Washington, a feminist leader took a wait-and-see policy.
We have due process in this country. We're not going to convict this man as we did not with the Smith case or in any of these other cases, convict somebody before they go through a trial.
Last night, Tyson and King were upbeat, departing for their court date.
I feel great. I can't wait till November 8th. I just want to fight. I'm trying to do a job here. I mean, and you know, I mean, this is ridiculous.
He knows that he didn't do nothing, and so he's going to prove to the world he didn't do nothing by going to court and doing it. And then getting ready for the fight, I pity Evander. Oh, he's in for big trouble.
Today, Tyson spent 4 minutes in front of Judge Patricia Gifford. He spoke only to give his birth date. His attorneys entered the innocent plea. He was then booked, fingerprinted, and photographed, and released on $30,000 bond to resume training for the richest fight in boxing history. Now with champion Evander Holyfield in Las Vegas, November 8. Tyson is box office. He will join the Showtime broadcasting crew this Saturday for its pair of title fights. The day before, this Friday, his attorneys will be back in that Indianapolis courtroom requesting a change of venue for the trial and a gag order on the case on local law enforcement officials.
Oh, there is something about wanting to be the heavyweight champion of the world. There's certainly no more glamour involved than for the heavyweight championship, and it's going to be contested next, the undisputed championship on November 8th in Las Vegas. Evander Holyfield, the undisputed title holder right now, will be challenged by Mike Tyson, the former holder, although Mike is certainly having problems of his own. He arrived in Indianapolis this past week to answer charges that he raped an 18-year-old beauty pageant contestant this past July. Now, the grand jury in Indianapolis handing down that indictment on Monday. Tyson showed up on Wednesday to be booked. He took a mugshot there, a fingerprinted. Bond was set at $30,000. Needless to say, he posted bond. The trial date has been set for January 27th. His November 8th showdown with Evander Holyfield is still on, and that has several special interest groups upset. The Guardian Angels, one of those groups, they say there's continued plans to fight. It makes light of violence against women. They say the fight should be postponed. Those responsible for putting the fight on certainly disagree, and that certainly includes former champ Tyson.
The fight comes first. After the fight, then we can take care of the trial, and then I'll be proven innocent. But my main objective right now is the fight.
A lot is going to be said between now and November 8th about that heavyweight championship fight. Should Mike Tyson continue this fight? How distracted will he be? To join us in some conversation about that, USA Today boxing writer John Saraceno joins Lynn Berman now. Lynn?
Thank you, Cambrell. John has been our guest judge at ringside as well this evening. What was your opinion when all of this broke? Should the fight continue normally?
I think it's pretty obvious, Len, that Mike Tyson has every legal right to fight. He has not been convicted of a crime at this point, and there's no way they can stop Mike Tyson from fighting. The fight will happen.
So obviously the $64 question is, what effect will all of this have on Tyson as he approaches this fight?
You know, it's interesting. Mike Tyson has shown a remarkable resiliency to adversity in the past. the deaths of custom model Jimmy Jacobs, domestic turmoil with Robin Givens, and he's shown he's been able to fight through it, primarily because I think fighters are basically selfish people, and I think he'll be able to insulate himself in a protective cocoon, sort of, and work through the problems and be ready for fight.
So do you think the whole fight promotion and the fight itself will just proceed normally, or will there just be so much talk and will it just snowball to the point of just being overwhelming come November 8th, you know, the talk of the rape charges?
I think there'll be some pockets of resistance. Obviously, various groups will protest the fight, I'm sure. But I think when push comes to shove, people are interested in watching Evander Holyfield and Mike Tyson fight. And I think by fight time, that's all people are going to be talking about.
Okay, John, stay with us. You'll be our guest judge for the next fight as well with Tony Lopez and Brian Mitchell. But now let's go back up to Cambrell Marshall.
The sporting event of the decade is coming. The fight of fights is coming. Boxing's most talked about matchup is coming. And there's only one place for a power-packing preview. HBO. See how Holyfield punched out a path to greatness. See how Tyson raced a rocky road to the top. Plus, boxing experts compare each fighter's style and technique. Before the showdown, check out the countdown to Holyfield Tyson, an HBO exclusive. Premieres Monday, October 21st.
Hello everyone, I'm Cambrell Marshall. Welcome once again to TVKO's Fight of the Month. We come to you first with breaking news from Las Vegas. The undisputed heavyweight championship bout scheduled between the former champion Mike Tyson and reigning champion Evander Holyfield has been postponed. Postponed, not canceled, as a result of a rib injury to the former champion Mike Tyson. Here's what we know. Tyson suffered the injury in training on October 8th. He re-injured it on October 15th while training. Non-contact injury, we should remember. He was examined by Dr. Gerald Higgins, an orthopedic surgeon in Las Vegas. Dr. Higgins recommended that the fight be postponed. At this point in time, promoters of the bout are discussing dates to reschedule it. A satellite news conference will be held tomorrow when the promoters, we suspect, will come up with their alternatives at that time. Once again, the heavyweight championship of the world scheduled for November 8th in Las Vegas between the former champion Mike Tyson and reigning champion Evander Holyfield has been postponed. We'll keep you up to date with details as we get them.
He's under indictment. He's under doctor's orders. Now Iron Mike's under the microscope of a tell-all author.
Ruth Roper insisted on sleeping in the same room as Mike and Rob.
Pulling no punches. His bout's been called off, but Iron Mike's still taking some body blows from this 150-pound weakling.
That unlikely opponent will reveal Mike Tyson's secrets when we come back. Just when embattled Iron Mike Tyson thought it was safe to come out of the dressing room, he's got someone else taking a swing at him. Bill McGowan has the story of the latest opponent who's pulling no punches.
Throughout his career as the heavyweight champion of the world, Iron Mike Tyson has had his mettle tested repeatedly. In the ring, he's been nearly invincible. But in the fishbowl of pop culture superstardom, he's done far more sinking than swimming.
It is tragic. I mean, if that was one word to summarize the course of his life so far, from boyhood on, from birth on almost, it's tragic.
Marty Illingworth is the latest to administer a published pummeling to the champ, an author who says Tyson's current problems are merely a logical progression from a troubled life.
Because he considers women as sexual objects by and large, and a lot of women present themselves to him as objects for his pleasure. You can't forget that side of it as well. That rough sex, is a likelihood. Say at this beauty pageant, if he did fondle these women, I can guarantee you that there were another 50 women who presented themselves to him to be fondled, and that he may have touched and they didn't say anything. In other words, he just sort of picks and chooses the women that he wants as if he's at some kind of banquet.
But Tyson's accused of flexing his muscles in a criminal way, allegedly raping a beauty queen in this Indianapolis hotel. If true, Illingworth says these reported problems with women are a result of his fabled and failed marriage.
With Robin and her mother, I think he was victimized by them. And the betrayals he felt because of that, perhaps, made him a hell of a lot more insensitive to other women and what they want.
When it came to marriage, Illingworth claims Givens' mother told Robin, "You better shop around." Reportedly on the shopping list, Eddie Murphy and Michael Jordan. But when they didn't bite, she reeled Tyson in, hook, line, and sinker.
It was like, you know, the frog marrying the princess. The frog prince got his princess. Well, he wasn't just a frog prince anymore, it seemed, to us. He was a Frankenstein.
Among the wrong turns in the road Mike Tyson has taken, where would you rank his marriage to Robin Givens?
Probably the single most dramatic turning point in his life. I don't think he will, in many ways, will ever recover from this. He will have to leave boxing, have an entirely new life.
But what would Mike Tyson do if he ever decided to leave the ring? I mean, there aren't a lot of other things he could do.
I see Mike ending up as an oddity in an arcade on Broadway. It'll be pathetic. He won't have any money. He won't have that many friends.
The future could be just that bleak for Tyson if he's convicted of this rape charge. The trial is scheduled to start January 27th. In a shocker this weekend, Tyson claims that an injury will postpone his upcoming title fight to January 20th, 1 week before the trial starts. Coincidence? Or is Tyson aware of how difficult it would be for a jury to send the heavyweight champion of the world off to prison?
I'm sure he feels that if he wins the title back, it'll be harder for the jury to convict him of rape. If he loses it, there may be an image or in the jury's mind that he's a loser anyway, so hey, it's more believable that he could have done this to this woman.
There's a lot at stake then.
A lot at stake.
For Tyson, who spent some of his teen years in a detention center, going to prison now would mean his troubled life had sadly come full circle.
In terms of Greek, classical tragedy, it would be the ultimate tragedy of the 20th century world of sports.
Mike Tyson's not doing much fighting these days, but his lawyers are. They're battling to have his trial postponed until after his bout with Evander Holyfield.
Boxing shot itself in the foot when the fight that most people wanted to see, the fight that made the most money and made the most sense, was called off. Evander Holyfield and Mike Tyson will not happen, not this year and maybe not ever. Part of the problem was Tyson's injury. The other part is the rape charge hanging over the former champ. The current champ has grown somewhat impatient, as Charlie Steiner reports.
This was supposed to have been a fight for the ages. Instead, Holyfield-Tyson can't get a date. Yesterday, Don King first proposed during a meeting in Manhattan in an attempt to salvage the fight a December 13th date, although he couldn't guarantee that his fighter, Tyson, would be fully recovered from his injured ribs. And after proposed dates in January were rejected, Holyfield-Tyson was put on hold until after Tyson's rape trial, which is scheduled to begin on January 27th in Indianapolis. But there is no guarantee that there will ever be a Holyfield-Tyson fight at all. In fact, King, according to those at yesterday's negotiations, said, "If it's not going to happen now, it's not going to happen." Those at the meeting weren't sure how to interpret Don King's remarks. Meanwhile, Evander Holyfield's preparations for the Tyson fight won't go to waste. ESPN has learned that Holyfield will likely defend his title on November 23rd against Francisco Damiani, a hard-hitting but slow and plodding challenger. The fight to take place in either Atlanta or Las Vegas in a fight that'll be fought on HBO. Holyfield will make something less than $10 million for the Damiani fight, or $20 million less than he would have made against Tyson. But while Tyson's ribs repair and he begins to prepare for the biggest fight of his life in a courtroom in Indianapolis, Don King is left to wonder, where will his next big payday come from? I'm Charlie Steiner, ESPN.
And heavyweight Riddick Bowe is fit to be tied over the thought of Holyfield passing him over. Bowe's manager is kicking around the possibility of legal action to get his fighter a title shot. Bowe is the #2 challenger in the WBC rankings.
There's a chance, by facing me, he can lose the title, and perhaps that's a lot of money out of winning for Evander Holyfield.
I think Holyfield will skirt Riddick Bowe at 6'5", 235 pounds, the hardest hitting heavyweight in the division right now, who can also box. I think he'd run through hell with gasoline drawers on before he fought Riddick Bowe.
Sounds like a wrestling promoter. Bo fights next week in Washington, D.C. against Elijah Tillery, and there is talk that if Tyson is able to fight before his trial, he will negotiate a bout with the unbeaten Bo.
Well, the biggest fight ever that never was now has an undercard of sorts. With Mike Tyson out of his way due to an injury, it is likely that Evander Holyfield's next fight will be November 23rd against Italy's Francesco Damiani. There is, however, a stumbling block. Damiani is not ranked by any of the big three organizations, and he was knocked around by Ray Mercer in his last fight, which makes him a safe risk for Holyfield to take. But under the current rules, Holyfield should fight the next available ranked contender, which would be Riddick Bowe. If the champ fights Damiani, he leaves himself open to be stripped of some or all of his belts. And one source told CNN tonight that promoter Don King might just use his influence with the WBC to do that, because a fight against Damiani would wipe out the chances of a Tyson-Holyfield fight before Tyson goes on trial for rape charges in January.
Star brings you the world of big events. The Big Bowl games, concerts, the championship games, the playoffs, title fights, hit movies. Big events the way they were meant to be seen. Big on Sharp Vision, the liquid crystal projection system with the 8-foot picture that makes you feel like you're there. Now, see the Holyfield-Tyson fight on Sharp Vision. Come in for a demonstration, and you could win a trip to the fight. Buy Sharp Vision and get a $500 rebate. Sharp Vision. For information, call 1-800-B-SHARP.
Well, Mike Tyson and Don King were in Atlanta today, passing out turkeys to the homeless. They'll be in Washington tomorrow doing the same thing in New York on Friday. It was no coincidence, however, that Tyson and King were in Atlanta just 3 days before Holyfield meets Burt Cooper, a fight which King considers a turkey.
What he's doing is an insult to everybody. Nobody, every dollar you spending to go see Holyfield fight this bum that he ain't ranked by no organization should be used to feed the hungry and house the poor and the underprivileged.
Holyfield should knock him out within 2 rounds, maybe 1. But if I fought him, I would kill him.
I question the good sense of any person or organization which would permit a convicted killer, Don King, or a man facing a possible 63 years in prison, Mike Tyson, to use them to insult one of Atlanta's true heroes, Evander Holyfield. I believe it is despicable for King and Tyson to come here to Atlanta for the express purpose of exploiting an extremely worthwhile cause for their own sleazy needs.
Well, already Duva and King are doing a nice job of posturing for an eventual Holyfield-Tyson fight, but Tyson's next battle's in Indianapolis on January 27th. If Tyson is cleared of the rape charges, look for Holyfield-Tyson in the spring, late March or early April, more than likely.
Welcome back to SportsCenter. Back to boxing. Mike Tyson's Turkey Tour continued today in Washington, D.C., where he and his promoter Don King were handing out food to the needy. But Tyson was also dishing out some food for thought on Evander Holyfield's upcoming bout.
It's a joke. It's a big joke. And if that's how much, consideration he has for the heavyweight championship, to fight somebody like Burt Cooper, who quits. Burt Cooper, the only, he's not even unranked. Burt Cooper quits. He's not even qualified to fight for the title. He's a quitter.
Tyson and King will be in New York on Friday. Their Turkey Tour will continue into the Midwest next week. Chris?
Attorney's request to delay the rape trial of the former heavyweight champion. Tyson still due to stand trial beginning January 27th. He's accused of raping a beauty contestant last summer in Indianapolis and has entered a plea of not guilty. His defense attorneys contend they need more time to prepare the case and are still taking sworn statements from 40 to 50 people. The prosecutor, meanwhile, said court documents filed in a lawsuit over the Tyson-Evander Holyfield fight, which was postponed because of a Tyson rib injury, would have to be held by April 6th. The fight would, and that, quote, it appears to be to the economic advantage of the defendant, meaning Tyson, to delay the trial, and that the intention is to have the fight before the trial. Judge Patricia Gifford said, quote, I don't believe it is of any concern to this court whether Mr. Tyson fights this year, next year, or ever.
Mike Tyson's trial on rape charges will begin as scheduled January 27th after his lawyers today failed to get a delay on grounds they needed more time to prepare his case. The former heavyweight champ is accused of raping a beauty pageant contestant in Indianapolis on July 19th and has entered a plea of not guilty. His lawyers say they're still taking sworn statements from 40 to 50 people. Tyson faces up to 63 years in prison if convicted of all charges.
Mike Tyson rape trial will take place as originally scheduled on January 27th. A motion by Tyson's attorneys to delay the start of the trial by at least 60 days was turned down Wednesday by Marion County Superior Court Judge Patricia Gifford. Tyson's attorneys had contended they needed more time to depose witnesses and not to allow a proposed fight between Tyson and champion Evander Holyfield to take place.
Welcome back. On January 27th, former heavyweight champion Mike Tyson faces the toughest fight of his life as he will stand trial in Indianapolis on rape charges. On Saturday, Tyson sat down with ESPN's Charlie Steiner and discussed, among other things, one topic that is certain to be dissected in court, his sex life.
My sex life is overrated, okay? This thing about me sleeping with 20 girls in one day and getting every girl at night and I'm with this girl, that's overrated, okay? And with the situation I am, why wouldn't anybody want to be around me? I'm just, you know what I mean, I'm just happy being who I am.
By the way, you can see that Tyson interview in its entirety on Sunday, January 26th. That is the day before Tyson's trial is set to begin.
The heavyweight champion of the world, even though Mike Tyson will be dominating headlines for the next several weeks. But Holyfield's people will be in a New Jersey courtroom this Thursday trying to clear the way legally now for a May 8th fight against Riddick Bowe. Holyfield's manager Shelley Finkel said he wants the Bowe fight because Tyson will not be available to fight March 20th, as specified in their mutual contract. Tyson's handlers say their man will be ready to fight. Whether Tyson is available to fight is a separate matter, one that will be determined beginning Monday morning over the next several weeks in Indiana. Mike Tyson has the absolute presumption of innocence as he stands trial on charges of rape, criminal deviant conduct, and criminal confinement. Charlie Steiner examines the case.
Welcome to Indianapolis. We're beginning at 9 o'clock Monday morning, Eastern Time. The Mike Tyson trial for rape gets underway. We expect it to be the ultimate in judicial drama. Mike Tyson, one of the world's most famous men, on trial for a most violent crime. We expect great drama involving a prosecutor, small-town guy, against the big city defense counsel. We expect the business of boxing to remain on hold until the outcome of the trial. Here now, a look at some of the people, places, and things in a background report on this case.
This is the Canterbury Hotel in Indianapolis, where early in the morning of July 19th, an 18-year-old contestant in the Miss Black America beauty pageant was in Mike Tyson's room, Suite 606. Tyson was in town as a guest of the beauty pageant. What went on in his room that Friday morning is what a jury will be asked to determine in Judge Patricia Gifford's Marion County courtroom beginning on Monday. Was it consensual sex, as Tyson proclaims, or was it rape? Mike Tyson was indicted on 4 counts, including rape. And 8 weeks after the alleged crime took place, he returned to Indianapolis, where he pleaded not guilty and has been released ever since on a $30,000 bond. Greg Garrison is the prosecutor's hired gun, a private attorney who is employed by the Marion County Prosecutor's Office in its most high-profile cases. It is Garrison who will present the state's case. He will be paid $20,000. Which is roughly what Mike Tyson has been paying per week to his defense attorney, Vincent Fuller. The 60-year-old Fuller, who successfully defended Don King against income tax evasion charges, is considered among the nation's best defense attorneys. Hearing the case is Patricia Gifford, who worked in the Marion County Prosecutor's Office before ascending to the bench in 1978. Unlike the William Kennedy Smith trial, which was seen around the world, this trial will not be televised. But ESPN legal correspondent Jim Drucker says some lessons were learned from the William Kennedy Smith case.
Charlie, the key factor is that the physical evidence must match the accuser's story if there's going to be a conviction. In the William Kennedy Smith case, you had her story, you had his story, which were totally different, but then the physical evidence matched his story, and that's why he was acquitted. There was no ripped clothing, there was sand in certain places. So here in the Tyson case, we're going to hear her story. We're going to hear Tyson's story through his lawyer. And the third element, we're going to see the evidence. If the jury believes that the physical evidence matches the accuser's story, then Tyson will be convicted.
Let's talk strategy now. What is the defense going to try to get across to the jury?
Defense has to change the focus of the entire case. Take it out of the jury's mind, have them not think about what Mike Tyson did at all or didn't do. Instead, they want to focus the jury on one question: what is the character of this woman? Did she bring this on herself?
And what about the prosecution? What are they going to try to hammer home?
Prosecution tries to do pretty much the reverse. Here's a poor, defenseless, young 18-year-old being taken advantage of by a 25-year-old former heavyweight champion of the world.
The key question that you hear on the street all the time in talking about this case, what is an 18-year-old girl doing in a 25-year-old man's hotel room at 2 o'clock in the morning? Is that going to be the crux of the matter in this courtroom?
No, I think that's overplayed. It's certainly the thing that will get the headlines, but it's not that important, because in 1990, a woman is permitted to say no. This jury will help redefine how obvious of a no it has to be, perhaps. But no, that's not really crucial.
Now, the other big question is going to be, what about Mike Tyson? Do we expect to see him on the witness stand or not?
They don't want to put Mike Tyson on the stand unless they have to. Vince Fuller, Tyson's lawyer, is a master at gaining acquittals without having the defendant testify. He acquitted Don King on tax evasion charges, and Don King never took the stand. He got an acquittal for John Hinckley, the man who shot President Reagan, and Hinckley never took the stand. So he can get the defendant's storyline into the case without the defendant testifying. But I think Tyson's going to have to wind up testifying. I think the decision will be made late. But if the accuser's story has a ring of truth, if the evidence that is brought in supports a story, then you're down, perhaps you need a knockout win in the late rounds, and Tyson might just be at the very end of the trial.
And for the first time, perhaps in Mike Tyson's entire life, and in the most important fight of his life, Mike Tyson won't be able to let his fists do the talking. For Jim Drucker, I'm Charlie Steiner. The trial begins Monday morning, 9 o'clock Eastern Time, here in the Marion County Courthouse. Now let's go back to SportsCenter.
Okay, Charlie, already 130 potential jurors have answered extensive questionnaires. 18 of those people were excused on Friday. Once the jury is selected and each side makes opening arguments, the prosecution will call 15 witnesses, including the accuser. The defense may call as many as 25 witnesses. Our Sunday conversation, and is with a man whose name will be making headlines for the next several weeks. Mike Tyson was indicted by a Marion County, Indiana grand jury on September 9th of last year. Shortly thereafter, Judge Patricia Gifford issued a gag order on all principals in Tyson's case, including the attorneys for both sides, and certainly about the particulars of the alleged crime. 1 month after that indictment, Charlie Steiner interviewed Tyson. The former champion was constrained, of course, by the gag order, but he did talk about his early years in Brooklyn, the circumstances that forged his view of the world and other people. Tonight, Mike Tyson, our Sunday evening conversation.
Being brought up in Brownsville at a young age, as you know, I've been corrupted with the bad crowd, and I met people, and I was in an environment where all the wrong things to do was the right thing. That's the respected thing to do.
Thinking of you as young Mike, kids were making fun of you because of the high-pitched voice and the lisp, and was that something that had an effect on you as a kid?
Well, you know, it never really bothered me to this extent. You know, what used to bother me when I was younger, people used to take things from me. I used to wear glasses, and this guy, I don't believe, he took the milk, and you always had milk when you was a kid. He took the milk, and he took my glasses. And I wanted to get my glasses, but I was scared to fight the guy for some reason, because he talked tough. But something that he did, it was so cruel, and I was devastated. But he took my glasses, folded them up. It was a big truck there. I think it was a lunch truck. He took the gas tank, opened, and put my glasses in the gas. Dropped them in the way, he pumped the gas, and put them down there, turned back, and I said, no way I would get my glasses. And at that time, I couldn't believe someone could be that cruel to do that. I couldn't believe they did that. I didn't even cry. I was just shocked that he did that. Because normally somebody would play with your stuff and just give it to you and then kick you in the butt when you turn around and get out of here. But he did that. I knew I wasn't going to get my glasses back. And I had to go home and had to get it from my mother.
Were you and your mom real tight?
Yeah, we were pretty good friends. We became friends in our later years.
But when you were running around being a bad guy, what was it like at home with you and your mom? Was that a hard thing?
She was embarrassed because my mother was an absolute good woman. She was just that's her nature, a good woman. She was good. She didn't believe. She never stole a loaf of bread in her life, and she just was upset when I come in with money, new clothes, and you know she knew no one gave me clothes. You know, I make up excuses. This happened. And just one day I gave her a bunch of money and said, "Oh, Mom, don't even ask me what I got from you. Just take it and buy something." But I mean, she was so hurt that I would go that way. she was just embarrassed. She was embarrassed I was that way.
Read something in the paper this morning which kind of struck me based on all of the conversations you and I have had over the years. And you're quoted as saying, things are going to have to change. I just can't be the basic, typical guy. I mean, saying hi to people. I guess I'm going to have to start saying, no, you can't hang out with me. You can't get autographs. I remember over the years we've talked about how you have always strived to be a regular guy in spite of the enormous fame that you've had. How difficult a transition has it, or is it for you, to withdraw and have to take a step back?
It's something that has to occur. It's going to have to happen because majority of people, you know, I mean, they take advantage of the fact that that's my aura of just a basic guy. And, you know what I mean, it's hard for me to change because that's what I always wanted to be. I was a normal guy, but I just can't allow people to take cheap shots, you know what I mean, trying to assassinate my character, lie. And by no means am I sinless. But it's some things are just absurd. Some of the things you hear, and it's just ludicrous, perverted, and it's just sometimes you can't even believe it.
You once told me it really wasn't hard being famous, because at that point in your life, things were going really, really well. Now, are you finding the difficulty of fame?
Yeah, you know, it's very funny that we said it because I used to think about people. I said, why do you got a lot of guys and stuff around them? Why do certain people have, you know, bodyguard? I never could understand because I never thought that anyone wanted to hurt them or do anything to them because I thought people just respect them and love them too much. But, you know, is the reason for that, you know, and they used to always tell me, why are you hanging out alone? What are you doing here alone? I said, I'm just hanging out. I just came to see you.
Are there times you want to just kind of trade it all in and just be old Mike again? Is it still worth it?
No, I don't think because I am all Mike. It's just that I am who I am because I didn't enjoy being that way. I didn't enjoy being the way people harass, the way people disrespect you, didn't show any respect for you. They only respect money and power and influence, and they didn't respect the majority of people again. I'm not saying everybody just didn't respect the average guy that just wanted to be happy and have, you know, be friends with everyone.
Sunday's Conversation is brought to you by Kodak Gold Film. Show your true colors.
Evander Holyfield is the farthest thing from Mike Tyson's mind. Jury selection has begun in Indianapolis where Tyson faces rape charges. If convicted, Tyson could spend up to 63 years behind bars. Steve Wrigley, CNN, Headline Sports.
Turn into the most important fight of Mike Tyson's life is underway in a state court in Indianapolis. The former heavyweight champ is charged with raping a beauty pageant last summer. The jury selection process is expected to last 2 days.
Coming up on SportsCenter, day one of the Mike Tyson trial in Indianapolis. The former champ arrives as jury selection begins. In the world of a former boxing champion. For the first time in his life, Mike Tyson faces a fight over which he may have no control whatsoever. The former heavyweight champ of the world faces up to 63 years in prison if he is convicted of the charges leveled against him. For the record, Tyson is charged with 1 count each of rape and confinement and 2 counts of criminal deviant behavior. It stems from an encounter last summer with an 18-year-old Miss Black America contestant. Charlie Steiner is in Indianapolis.
Good evening, Bill. Nearly 700 writers, reporters, and technicians are here covering the Mike Tyson trial, which is roughly the same number of reporters that cover one of Mike Tyson's fights. Unfortunately for Tyson, the scene is not Las Vegas or Atlantic City. It's the Marion County Courthouse here in Indianapolis. Tyson arrived for the opening day of his trial shortly before 9 o'clock. He was accompanied by his chief defense counsel, Vincent Fuller. Along with Tyson, John Horn and Rory Holloway, his friends and confidants, who normally accompany him to the ring in his prize fights. As they walk up the stairs to the second-floor courtroom, past dozens of television cameras, courthouse onlookers mostly shouted their support. But outside, Guardian Angels protesters made their presence felt and heard. 13 years of this was Tyson's only public reaction.
Security in the Marion County Courthouse is heavy. This is the jury box where prospective jurors spent the day questioned by Tyson's defense team and by prosecutor Greg Garrison under the watchful eye of Judge Patricia Gifford. Tyson was in the courtroom, sitting behind his lawyers as the jury selection process continued through the day. Outside the courtroom, Tyson's ever-present promoter Don King was surrounded by bodyguards. King now holds the distinction, not surprisingly, of holding the first news conference during the trial.
Fair play is really all we want, a level playing field. A level playing field, I have no doubt that Mr. Tyson will be vindicated.
After his news conference, King left the building, and only coincidentally, fire trucks arrived at the courthouse. Too many smokers, we're told, outside Judge Gifford's courtroom set off a smoke detector. At 6:15 Eastern time on Monday night, Mike Tyson left the courthouse. And when the day was done, a total of 5 jurors had been selected. 4 men, all in their mid-20s, 1 of them black, and 1 middle-aged woman. Joining me now is ESPN's legal correspondent, Jim Drucker. Does the makeup of the jury tell us anything in the early going?
In the early going, no, Charlie. Every side says they want a fair and impartial jury, but what that means is in a close case with the facts, they want jurors who are most prone to have the prejudice and bias of their side.
What about the questioning today? What did that tell you?
Questioning told us a lot about what's going to be in this case. For example, the defense hinted very strongly that there's going to be a lot of vulgar language entered into evidence from Mike Tyson. To give you an example, they gave the question, if you hear vulgar language, Mr. Juror, will you be able to discuss this with the other jurors? In addition, there's a good deal of support that the defense is going to show that they're going to attack the accusing woman somewhat vigorously. For the state, there are suggestions in the questions to the jury that they're going to volunteer right off the bat that the woman accusing Mike Tyson used very bad judgment in going up to the hotel room, and also they're going to certainly highlight that Mike Tyson is an out-of-towner, came into the city and perhaps committed a crime.
Jury selection will continue Tuesday morning, 9 o'clock. For Jim Drucker, I'm Charlie Steiner at the Marion County Courthouse in Indianapolis. Let's go back to Sports Center.
Mike Tyson rape trial began today in Indianapolis as attorneys for both sides clarified the key issue of this case, whether an 18-year-old beauty pageant contestant consented to have sex with Mike Tyson. The former heavyweight champ is charged with rape, 2 counts of criminal deviant conduct, and also 1 count of confinement. CNN's Jeff Flock has the report on day 1 of the trial.
Greeted by cheers and flashbulbs, Mike Tyson walked into a Marion County, Indiana court building that may hold a tougher challenge than any ring he's ever climbed into. Tyson faces more than 60 years in prison, charged with raping an 18-year-old Miss Black America contestant. Tyson took the long walk to court for the start of his trial with his defense team, headed by one of the most prominent lawyers in Washington, Vincent Fuller. Also on hand to provide support, Tyson's friend and promoter, Don King.
All we want is a level playing field with due process so that justice can prevail.
Central to a fair trial, a fair jury. Both sides spent Monday trying to make certain the jurors they pick will be fair to them. Prosecutor Greg Garrison asking questions of the jurors like, is it fair for a woman to be able to say no? And do you think rape is less of a crime if the alleged victim uses bad judgment in where she goes? The defense team asking questions like, do you understand that because a man is a boxer, he's not necessarily violent? And should celebrities be held to a higher standard? The fruits of all of those questions, 5 jurors so far. 1 black man, 1 white woman, and 3 white men. Who does that give the edge to?
The jurors who have come up so far to be considered seem to have some problems whether you're on one side or the other. So I think at this particular point, we don't get a real indication that either side is getting ahead of the other one.
The trial pits Tyson's hired gun, high-powered defense attorney Fuller, against Indianapolis's own hired gun prosecutor, Greg Garrison.
He's a good lawyer. I mean, but we got a lot of good lawyers around here.
Tyson went home on Monday knowing that the trial is so far moving on schedule. A jury could be picked by Tuesday. I'm Jeff Flock, CNN, Indianapolis.
Among the 5 jurors who were seated before court was adjourned today are a truck driver, a T-shirt painter, a body shop parts manager, and also a specialist who works with learning disabled and emotionally handicapped children. 2 of the men who were picked said that they were sports fans, but that they do not follow boxing, although they have seen Mike Tyson fight on television. 11 jurors were excused on the first day of selection, which is expected to last at least through tomorrow. Dan?
Coming up next on SportsCenter, all eyes are on Indianapolis, where Mike Tyson awaits trial.
And early this morning, trying to stay loose while his future hangs in the balance. Also, late word that Cecil Fielder, the home run king, has signed a one-year deal with the Tigers. More on that in a moment. In Indianapolis today, the Mike Tyson trial, day number 2, as jury selection continued. ESPN's Charlie Steiner is covering the trial and has the latest now from the Marion County Courthouse.
6 more jurors were selected in day 2 of the Mike Tyson trial. That brings to a total now of 11. 5 more still have to be picked. 4 of those 5 will be alternates. We expect that to happen on Wednesday. Tyson left the courthouse at 6:30 Eastern Time on Tuesday night. It has been a long day for all of us, but especially for the defendant.
How you feeling?
Like most days when Tyson is preparing for a fight, the former heavyweight champion was up early in the morning, jogging by the dawn's early light in Carmel, about 15 miles north of Indianapolis. Tyson is renting this home in the affluent Indianapolis suburb for the duration of the trial. 2 hours later, Tyson arrived at the courthouse, once again greeted by a battery of flash bulbs and news cameras and several dozen fans and well-wishers. As prosecutor Greg Garrison and his assistant Barbara Trathan spent the day questioning prospective jurors from their table in a folksy conversational style, Tyson's lead defense attorney Vincent Fuller stood behind a podium and asked his questions in a more authoritarian manner in a resonant but staccato-like delivery. At his office, the 44-year-old Garrison sits behind his antique desk, and he's aware of the generally poor reviews that prosecutor Maura Lash received in the William Kennedy Smith trial. But he has no fear of that happening to him in the Tyson trial.
It means nothing, absolutely nothing. There were probably X thousand people who were acquitted of crimes the same day that Kennedy Smith walked out the back door of the courtroom. None of them mean anything either.
A private attorney who was hired by the Marion County Prosecutor's Office to handle this case, suddenly this local attorney has become a national name.
I didn't have any hand in causing it. I won't have much to do with how long it lasts because, I mean, a conviction, and you guys will be writing about something else in 10 days.
Ultimately, Garrison realizes the strength or weakness of his case could well ride on the believability of the accuser.
That person can get up there and stumble and make mistakes and be nervous and win the hearts of everybody in the room. It's a matter of what they perceive, which is why the jury system still works, because collectively juries have a tendency to see into people pretty far.
The seemingly even-tempered Garrison does not appear to be overwhelmed by this high-profile case. In fact, he seems rather comfortable.
If you're covering the World Series or you're covering, you know, some high school all-star game, you still set the cameras up, you still interview a few people, and you still get ready to do your game.
And it still takes 9 innings.
And you got to get dressed, and if you don't show up, you lose.
Garrison will show up again in the morning as the trial continues. And this, of course, is Jim Drucker, our ESPN legal correspondent. Jim, you've had an opportunity to sit in the courtroom the past couple of days. Give us a scouting report, if you will, on Greg Garrison.
Charlie, he's strong on style, less so on substance. In one vivid case, there was a juror who had admitted he had spoken about the case with friends. The friends thought that the woman accuser had, quote, asked for it, couldn't get him thrown off for cause, instead had to use one of the very valuable preemptory challenges to get rid of that juror.
That's going to do it for now here at the Marion County Courthouse in Indianapolis. For Jim Drucker, I'm Charlie Steiner. Let's go back to SportsCenter.
Thank you, gentlemen. Of the 11 juries selected so far, 7 are male, 2 of them are black, and 4 of the jurors are female, 1 of them black. They range in age from 21 to 55 years old. Bill?
Day 2 of Mike Tyson's rape trial today in Indianapolis. Judge Patricia Gifford had set today as the deadline for selecting the 12 jurors and 4 alternates, but the process will continue tomorrow because only 11 of the 16 needed had been chosen when today's session adjourned. Meanwhile, Tyson's day began when he stumbled up the stairs on his way to the second-floor courtroom. He then broke any tension he was feeling by cracking a quick smile
Among the jurors seated today, though, a 37-year-old ex-Marine, an IBM marketing manager, and a 31-year-old woman who works for the Chamber of Commerce. That brings the total to 7 men and 4 women. Opening statements will come after the final jury selections. Tyson faces up to 63 years in prison if convicted of the rape charges brought against him by an 18-year-old Miss Black America contestant. And Hannah, he is certainly staying focused, at least for getting another shot at the belt, Evander Holyfield's belt right now, because he is jogging every morning and working up a sweat before he heads to the courtroom.
Yes, he was up at 5 a.m. this morning working out.
Opening arguments in the rape trial of boxer Mike Tyson could begin as early as Wednesday. Charles Ziwi reports the focus of the trial centers on the interpretation of yes and no.
Consent has emerged as a key issue in Mike Tyson's rape trial. In court, Tyson showed no emotion as one woman juror seated agreed with defense attorney Kathleen Biggs in saying that most 18-year-olds know about sex and should be treated as adults, that the alleged victim was old enough to decide on her own whether to have sex with someone, that someone can agree to sex by their actions. The teenage beauty contestant who claims Tyson raped her in a downtown hotel last summer is 18 and has been portrayed by the defense as naive, someone who knew what she was getting into and implied she wanted to make love with the ex-champ in a 2 a.m. rendezvous. For the defense team, it's the most crucial element of the case.
I think he's trying to find people who will look at this with an open mind, will say, hey, these are two people, this was a private situation. How in the world are you going to be able to judge who said what in this situation?
That seeds reasonable doubt among jurors and sets up a Tyson acquittal. One potential black juror struck from the panel said flatly, you go where you're not supposed to be, you get what you deserve. It's a sentiment echoed among Indianapolis residents and at a market across the street from the courthouse.
What's the girl going up to the apartment at 1 o'clock in the morning to play checkers or what?
You know, he's a celebrity. There's a lot of interest.
I think he'll get off, though. I do. She went there to have sex with this man. She's mad because she didn't get paid.
Testimony, when it begins, promises to be downright steamy. Lawyers have repeatedly asked jurors if they're uncomfortable about discussing adult genitalia, vulgar language, and sex. And opening arguments could come as early as Wednesday. Charles Ziwi, CNN, Indianapolis.
The trial of boxer Mike Tyson's heating up. Jeff Locke reports attorneys are feuding over what to ask the potential jurors.
Opening arguments won't come until Wednesday or perhaps Thursday in Mike Tyson's rape trial. But already the lawyers for both sides have begun arguing their cases in the questions they are asking to prospective jurors. As he did on the first day of jury selection, prosecutor Greg Garrison asked each juror, is it fair for a woman to say no? Suggesting the alleged victim will testify she said no to Tyson's advances. Is the testimony of one witness enough to convict? Suggests that though they will call other witnesses, the alleged victim's testimony will be the key. And the question, if someone uses poor judgment about where they go, is what happens to them any less a crime, is designed to answer questions that jurors may have about why the woman was in Tyson's room here at this hotel at 2 o'clock in the morning. On the defense side, asking jurors, do you understand that consent can be a defense against a rape charge, demonstrates what Tyson's defense will be, that the alleged victim consented to sex. Do you agree that someone could consent by their actions? Suggests that Tyson will argue that although the woman may have said no, what she meant was yes. And should 18-year-olds be treated as adults in sexual matters, may be designed to head off perceptions about the 18-year-old woman who has been described as sometimes looking more like a 12-year-old. So far, the jury selection picture, 11 down, 1 to go, plus alternates. So far, the jury consists of 7 men, 4 women, 8 white, 3 black. Those who thought it would be impossible to pick a jury in Indianapolis were apparently wrong. I'm Jeff Locke, CNN in Indianapolis.
11 jurors have now been seated in the rape trial of heavyweight boxer Mike Tyson. A total of 16 must be chosen, including 4 alternates. Attorneys on both sides clashed Tuesday over what kinds of questions to ask potential jurors. Prosecutors objected when defense lawyers tried to ask if women could consent to sex without saying yes.
Coming up next on SportsCenter, the jury is in place and all is in readiness for the trial of former champ Mike Tyson. Continues to mount in Indianapolis. day 3 as Mike Tyson's trial draws closer.
Yeah, and if the ex-champ has had a restless night, who really could blame him, Bill? Tyson had an early start on this, the 3rd day of his trial in Indianapolis. Jury selection has been completed, and soon the prosecution and defense will begin to paint the pictures of what each side contends happened during the visit to Indy, which resulted in Tyson's arrest. Charlie Steiner is covering the trial.
The 12 jurors and the 3 alternates are now sequestered. Thursday, the opening arguments and the opening testimony is set to begin. Day 3, however, was very much like day 2 and day 1, with one notable exception. An army of satellite trucks takes up an entire city block. Tickets are being hawked by scalpers. And then there's Mike Tyson, on his way up the stairs in the 3rd day of his trial. But there was one new addition to Tyson's entourage, 83-year-old Camille Ewald, who is effectively Tyson's surrogate mother and the housemaid of the late Customato. It was in their home in Catskill, New York, that Tyson grew up after leaving reform school at the age of 12. Tyson has always had a great affection for Camille, as shown in this Mother's Day card from when he was a teenager. And in an interview we did at her home, she wondered about those who are now closest to Tyson.
I don't think so Mike has anyone around him to actually care for me the way Cos did.
Does that make you nervous?
But Mike is not dumb. He knows it.
Camille spent Wednesday in the courtroom, sitting by her young man, as she did in our conversation just days after he was indicted.
The woman comes so strong to him, he doesn't know if the woman likes him for Mike. If you strip Mike of the money of the cars that he has, just put him alone someplace, if the same woman would love him as Mike. So that's why he's confused. And I believe Mike, there's no rape, because I know Mike with the girls. He's very gentle with the girls. If, in case you say that you would find him guilty, then I would say there is no justice. Nobody was there to watch him if he raped her or he did not rape her. That's his word against hers. So how could they find him guilty?
Tyson left the courthouse at 4 o'clock Wednesday afternoon. By that time, the entire jury had been selected. 8 men, 4 women. Of the 12 jurors, 3 are black. 3 alternates were also selected instead of 4. And this, of course, is ESPN's legal correspondent, Jim Drucker. The jury makeup is primarily young, male, and blue-collar. Is there anything to read into that?
Not much, Charlie. The popular press will make a lot, but it's really not as important as the fact that they're going to judge the case on the evidence. Far more important than their age or their attitudes, their lifestyles. If it was just age, we wouldn't have spent 3 days asking questions. We would have just asked for their birth certificates.
All right. Now, what about the appearance of Camille Ewald today? Does that in any way impact the jury?
I don't think at all. The jury probably doesn't even know who she is. She's 15 feet away from Mike Tyson in the courtroom, and I don't think they'll connect Mike Tyson with a white woman.
On Thursday morning, of course, we're going to have the opening arguments and the opening testimony. Can we expect to see the accuser?
I think you have to expect you'll see the accuser. If it's a strong case, she'll be the very first witness. You learn that the first day in law school. Lead with your best witness. In the William Kennedy Smith case, accuser didn't show up for several days, and I think that was their admissions that they didn't have a strong witness.
Thursday morning, it's going to start to heat up here at the Marion County Courthouse. Along with Jim Drucker, I'm Charlie Steiner, ESPN. Let's go back to SportsCenter.
On the show, Charlie Steiner alluded to the fact that tickets to the Mike Tyson trial were being scalped out in front of the Marion County Courthouse today. Scalping, by the way, is legal in Indiana, but keep in mind these tickets are free. 17 of the free courtroom passes were available to the public, so you can understand why people were lined up early this morning for a chance to grab one. One lucky person was lucky enough to find a late arriving fan who paid $100 for the pass. He obviously got what he wanted.
You sold it for $100?
Want another one? I want to be inside the courtroom to see what goes on for myself. I'm excited about it. I think Mike Tyson is not guilty, and I'd like to see how justice is dealt.
But that'll be enough of that. Today, Judge Patricia Gifford passed an order saying that no passes will be sold in or about the courthouse. If caught, a person can be found in criminal contempt of court and thrown in jail.
Was completed today in the rape trial of former heavyweight champion Mike Tyson. The racial makeup of the jury had become an issue in the trial, first because the defense had complained the jury pool was not comprised of a sufficient number of blacks who live in Marion County, Indiana, where the trial's taking place. However, a higher percentage of black jurors were eventually selected. 3 of the 12 are black, and there are 4 women on the jury. Meanwhile, Tyson continued his early morning ritual of road work in Indianapolis to stay in shape in the event he's acquitted and can fight again. And later in the day, a rare public smile crossed his face when he was accompanied to court by the woman he considers his mother, Camille Ewald, who was the common-law wife of the late Cus D'Amato, who took Tyson from reform school and into his home as a teenager, accompanied the former champion to court. Opening arguments were delayed until Friday to allow the judge to decide motions on the case. Tyson faces up to 63 years in prison if convicted. Fred?
Thanks, gentlemen. It is not known if Camille Ewald is on the witness list for this trial, nor how defense counsel Vincent Fuller might employ her or her relationship with Tyson, if at all. Judge Patricia Gifford today ruled on several motions permitting the jury to view the clothing the accuser wore at the time of the alleged rape. The accuser's sexual history will not be admitted into evidence. Now, the limited public seating in that courtroom is by pass only. Spectators have been lining up as early as 4 a.m., even earlier, to acquire one of the 17 daily passes. And today came the spectacle of several spectators armed with those passes to the courtroom, promptly selling them, on one occasion for $100 to a bail bondsman, on another for the same price to a radio reporter.
You sold it for $100?
One other one? I want to be inside the courtroom to see what goes on for myself. I'm excited about it. I think Mike Tyson is not guilty, and I'd like to see how justice is dealt.
Judge Gifford learned of the scalping, which is technically legal under Indiana law, but she did send word that any scalping on courthouse property in the future will subject those selling to charges of criminal contempt of court.
Well, if jury selection's worth 100, what is actual testimony worth to some of these people?
Now, only 17 passes. It's about equitably distributed between public passes each day and press passes.
$100.
Yeah.
Not here.
Opening statements began today in the rape trial of former heavyweight boxing champ Mike Tyson. Jury selection was completed yesterday. The panel was sequestered. Tyson is accused of raping a Miss Black America contestant last July. He says she consented to sex. If convicted, Tyson faces up to 63 years in prison. And opening statements presented this morning in the trial of boxing's #1 heavyweight contender, Mike Tyson. He is accused of raping an 18-year-old beauty contestant. Charles Ziwi has this report from Indianapolis. We warn you, some of the language used in the courtroom today is descriptive.
With the prelims out of the way, Mike Tyson's rape trial turned to the main event. Tyson, who has a reputation for fondling and roughly treating women, heard himself described in court as a callous and malicious rapist. In a dramatic and emotional opening argument, Special Prosecutor Greg Garrison described how Tyson met his accuser at a rehearsal for the Miss Black America beauty pageant last July, and how Tyson asked her if she wanted to go out. Just before 2 a.m. that same night, Garrison told the jury, Tyson called her from his limo outside her hotel and asked her if she wanted to go out, just to talk, and that once inside the car, Tyson embraced her and kissed her. That he lured her then to his hotel room under the pretense of just making a phone call, but once inside said to her, "You're turning me on." The prosecutor said the young woman then stepped into a bathroom to remove a soiled panty liner, emerging to find Tyson clad only in his undershorts on the bed. Garrison claimed Tyson ripped off her clothes, stuck his fingers in her vagina, and then performed oral sex before raping her. He pinned her down like a rag doll, Garrison declared, as she protested, saying she didn't want to have a baby. She wanted to go to college. Don't fight, Garrison quoted Tyson as telling the woman. Medical evidence, he said, will show the woman suffered 2 vaginal abrasions, but that standard post-rape test to confirm an assault could not be done because she was in the middle of her period, and it was more than a day later before she reported the assault to police. Defense attorney Vincent Fuller, however, told a different story, that the woman, although only 18, was sophisticated, that she knew what she was doing, and that she was out for money. There's no question that Tyson and the woman engaged in sex, he said, but that sex was consensual. And he declared she could have escaped at any time that she wanted to. There's no evidence that she was locked in a bedroom.
Tyson's accuser may be on the stand testifying this afternoon. Charles Ziwi, CNN, Indianapolis.
Story that came from Thursday, day 4 of the Mike Tyson trial. It produced the first day of testimony. The woman who has accused the former champion of rape she took the stand in Indianapolis.
Legal correspondent Jim Drucker and Charlie Steiner report from Indianapolis. Some of the language and descriptions used during testimony may be offensive to some viewers.
Dressed in a gray suit and white blouse, the 18-year-old accuser told in a soft, occasionally wavering voice how, during a Miss Black America pageant rehearsal on July 18th, Tyson asked her out. She gave him her phone number, but she said she never expected he would call. He did at 1:30 in the morning, after she had returned to her hotel room from a concert. She testified that Tyson said he only wanted to talk and was led to believe that he would take her to some parties. She said she even brought along a camera. They stopped at the Canterbury Hotel because Tyson said he had to pick up his bodyguard. As they walked down the hall to room 606, they neither held hands or even touched. Once inside the room, she testified, Tyson went straight to the bedroom. She says she remained in the foyer. Tyson turned on the television, sitting at the head of the bed. After much prodding, she came into the bedroom and sat at the end of the bed. After talking and watching TV for 15 minutes, she said Tyson's voice suddenly changed, saying, "You really turned me on." At that point, she said she was going to the bathroom and told Tyson, "When I come back, I want to see Indianapolis." When she returned from the bathroom, she said Tyson was in his underwear. She said he pulled her close to him. She said, "It's time for me to leave." He said, according to the accuser, "Don't fight me," as he removed her clothes against her will. She testified she tried to fight Tyson off. She said it was like hitting a wall. "Don't fight me, don't fight me," she quoted Tyson. At that point, she said he pulled her onto the bed and kept her down with his elbow and forearm. "Get off me, please stop. Don't fight me, just relax," said Tyson. "No, stop," she replied. "I was scared," she testified. At that point, she claims he jammed his fingers inside her. "Oh, stop, you're hurting me." She described it as excruciating pain. Then she testified he started laughing, as if it was a game. As her voice began to tremble, she testified that Tyson then exposed his penis, and she said he jammed it in her. She said it felt like someone was ripping me apart. "Don't fight me, Mommy," is how she said he replied. She said he removed himself as he ejaculated. And she testified he said, "Don't you love me now?" After he ejaculated, she quickly got dressed. Tyson was alleged to have said, "You can stay if you want." "Why?" she replied, "So you can do this to me again?" "You're just a crybaby," she said, was his reply as she left the room. Riveting testimony, to be sure. This is ESPN's legal correspondent, Jim Drucker. From a legal point of view, what was your assessment of the accuser's testimony?
Well, they did a good job preparing her. She was well coached, but more than that, her story was very believable. It was a very reasonable story. The little details really sounded real. And she said it in a believable way, Charlie. There was no crying, really more astonishment than even anger.
Is this the kind of testimony that may force the defense to put Mike Tyson eventually on the witness stand?
Well, we've only really heard half her story. The other half will come out on cross-examination. But if she does well there, then Mike will have to testify.
Greg Garrison, the prosecutor, I think is generally feeling pretty good after himself after the first day.
Yeah, he's exercised the ghost of Moral Ash, the prosecutor from the William Kennedy Smith case, and he presented a very good argument today.
One of the things I think we both noticed today was Mike Tyson's reaction or lack of same.
Oh, very much so. I watched him throughout, and I never saw him change an expression once.
He kept his eyes on the witness all day, and she rarely, if ever, looked over in that direction. The cross-examination tomorrow is going to be very key by Vince Fuller. What vulnerabilities did you see in her testimony on Thursday?
Well, I think he's going to go after simply saying point blank that she's a liar, that her training in beauty pageants almost trains her to how to communicate to win a contest. That's number one. I think he's also going to push, as he said in opening statement, that she's doing it for money, that she's hired lawyers, maybe to sue, and that she made some comments about Robin Gibbons getting a very big divorce settlement.
It was a good day, generally speaking, as far as the consensus of reporters and lawyers around the courthouse for the prosecution. And Greg Garrison, he had a brilliant opening statement, and for the most part, it looked as if the accuser withstood at least any early challenges. For Jim Drucker, I'm Charlie Steiner, ESPN, Indianapolis.
All right, thanks very much, gentlemen. Cross-examination began late Thursday and will continue Friday morning. Prior to the trial, defense attorney Vincent Fuller said Tyson would not take the stand. Now it is believed that he will testify, and along with rape, Tyson charged with confinement and 2 counts of deviant criminal conduct and faces up to 63 years in jail
if convicted.
The woman accusing boxer Mike Tyson of rape is telling her story. In an Indianapolis courtroom yesterday, she told jurors Tyson pinned her and raped her while she begged him to stop. Tyson says the sexual encounter last July was consensual. His lawyers charge the 18-year-old woman is an angry, jilted gold digger. Outside the courtroom, 50 people rallied to the accuser's support. One protester says Tyson walks into cheering fans while the alleged victim must hide her face.
Tyson's accuser was back on the stand today.
But this time, instead of telling her story to the prosecution, well, she had to answer questions from Tyson's attorneys. It was day 5 of the Mike Tyson trial in Indianapolis. The former heavyweight champion who is charged with rape, confinement, and criminal deviant conduct. Once again, all eyes and ears were riveted on Tyson's 18-year-old accuser, who arrived at the Marion County Courthouse about an hour before being cross-examined by the Chief Defense Counsel, Vincent Fuller. That cross-examination lasted about 3.5 hours. Charlie Steiner picks up the story from Indianapolis.
Fuller asked only a handful of questions about any sex that took place in room 606 of the Canterbury Hotel. He asked, "Did you have some hopes of establishing a relationship with Mr. Tyson? I would never see him again. How could I hope to have a relationship?" Fuller asked, "Did you engage in any kissing or hugging with him on the bed in the bedroom?" "No," she replied, "not until he was raping me." Fuller later asked, "You didn't say, 'Aren't you going to walk me downstairs?'" "I didn't want him to," she replied. Fuller asked the accuser if she was alarmed when Tyson first kissed her in his limousine early in the morning of July 19th. She replied, "Anybody can be fooled. Looking back now, it was stupid. But that still didn't give him a reason to do what he did." The 18-year-old accuser seemed more confident under cross-examination than she did in her direct testimony. Once again, Tyson sat and watched and showed no discernible emotion. The accuser left the courthouse about an hour after she finished the cross-examination. Most courtroom observers described her as a powerful witness. Later this afternoon, the prosecution called several employees of the Canterbury Hotel who were on duty the night of the incident. It was a third-shift bellman, Chris Lowe, who testified that as he was delivering room service sometime after 2 a.m. to Tyson's bodyguard in room 604, he saw a woman hurrying out of Tyson's room, 606, with shoes in hand, looking from side to side. Lowe testified that Tyson's bodyguard, Dale Edwards, saw the woman, and he said he noticed Edwards smirk, which was the exact word the accuser used in her testimony on Thursday. And this is ESPN's legal correspondent, Jim Drucker, who spent the day in the courtroom as we did. Jim, I guess the first question, how would you assess, now that the accuser has come and gone, her effectiveness as a witness?
Every lawyer's dream, Charlie. She was great, she was credible, she was believable, and they didn't chip away at her very much.
What about the effectiveness of Vince Fuller, the crackerjack defense attorney from Washington, D.C., and his ability or inability to break her down?
I don't think he wanted to even try to break her down. She was such a good witness, he feared the overreaction that if he tried to break her down, jury would come away with much more sympathy for her.
On the accuser level, he in essence tossed in the towel in this portion of the trial.
Well, almost, not quite all the way. There were 2 points that he did hit again, and he's going to remind the jury of much later. Number one, that she might be doing it for money, hit again on the fact that she hired lawyers, perhaps to sue Tyson down the line, and also brought up the fact that she's been saying the whole time that never did she have any sexual contact with Mike Tyson, even short of intercourse. But he brought up the point that perhaps another beauty contestant will testify that the accuser told the other contestant that she actually kissed, petted, and otherwise was involved with Mike Tyson.
But all things being equal, she was a very effective witness.
Oh, very good. And the defense is going to have to do some maneuvering now.
The effectiveness of the accuser as a witness, does that bring Mike Tyson closer to the stand when the defense is turned?
The only way for Mike Tyson to win this case now, I believe, is for Mike Tyson to testify. We've heard her story. We've heard other people supporting her story, hotel employees who agree that they walked in separately, not arm in arm, and things like that. So her story's out there. It sounds right. And the backup support of the employees of the hotel make her even more credible.
Briefly, what's next for the prosecution?
Prosecution will continue doing what they did today, bringing in more witnesses to support the different aspects of her story of what happened before and after the alleged attack.
And there is at least one more startling piece of evidence that the prosecution is expected to introduce here in the court within the next couple of days. The 911 emergency tape by the accuser to the Indianapolis Police Department, ESPN has learned, may prove to be more damaging than her actual testimony. In defense counsel Vincent Fuller's opening statement yesterday, he suggested that the accuser was angry and disillusioned at having been treated as a one-night stand. There is no indication of that on the 13-minute tape recorded at 1:20 in the morning, 24 hours after the incident took place. The court will hear the accuser talking with the 911 operator, unsure whether or not to press charges. She described Tyson as merely a famous person, clearly reluctant to name him. The accuser is heard asking advice of the 911 operator on what to do. On the tape, the accuser tells the operator that she is fearful that no one would believe what happened to her because of who the defendant is. She was asked by the operator if she wanted to file charges. She replied she just wanted to see a doctor. The accuser's voice sounded wavering and nervous. The tape, like her testimony, was riveting. The accuser's personal attorneys Ed Gerstein and David Hennessy declined any comment on the tape. I'm Charlie Steiner, ESPN at the Marion County Courthouse.
Welcome to Larry King Live. Tonight, Iron Mike Tyson, bruised in the early rounds of a legal bout over rape charges. Can he get a fair trial?
He's been described as a caged animal whose ferocious boxing style propelled him to the top of his profession. But now, Mike Tyson's accused of letting his animal instincts show outside of the ring. Stories of troubled relationships with women are nothing new, but this time the charge is rape. And the possible knockout punch, a 63-year jail sentence. Despite the attention being paid to the proceedings in Indianapolis, this case, like most, boils down to his word against hers. Joining us to discuss the trial and its implications are Dan Kaplis, a Denver attorney who's been covering the trial for radio and television stations in his city. In Los Angeles, Michael Marley, a former reporter turned boxing promoter who has covered Tyson's career from the beginning. And here in Washington, we're joined by Steve Lott, a former roommate and business associate of Mike Tyson's. We'll start with Dan, the attorney. Your summary, thus far of this trial, which is in its, just finished its third day.
Well, Larry, so far, the opening rounds go to the prosecution. First of all, they got a great jury. They got a young jury. The average age is under 35. Young juries tend to favor the prosecution in acquaintance rape cases. First of all, they're familiar with the reality of acquaintance rape. Second, they tend to be more supportive of a woman's rights, a woman's right to go wherever she wants to go at 2 in the morning and not have that conduct justify a rape, which is critical in this case because the defense is hammering away on the fact that the accuser voluntarily went to Tyson's room at 2 in the morning. Also, the accuser herself, Larry, rape prosecutions usually die during the cross-examination of the accuser. Not the case here at all. This young lady has been a spectacular witness. 18 years old, 5'4", 108 pounds, strikingly beautiful in a fresh and wholesome way. I mean, she's been poised, she's been articulate. When she sparred with defense counsel Vincent Fuller, she's done it in a polite way. If there's any knock on her at all, Larry, it's been that she's been a little too smooth, a little too well rehearsed. But I'm sure the prosecutors would rather have that than any hint of instability or memory problems. So the prosecution's going strong right now.
Tyson showing any emotion at all?
That's interesting, Larry. The first 2 days, it's as if he wasn't even here. He didn't sit with his attorneys. He never looked at the jury. He rarely interacted with his counsel. The last day or two, he's focused. He is staring at the accuser every minute of her testimony, but rarely a facial expression. Usually, Larry, in a case like this, the accused will show, some emotion. They'll grimace. They'll nod their head no when a strong point's made by the accuser, but not Tyson. The only reaction at all came during the testimony of a bellhop at the hotel where the rape allegedly took place. When the bellhop talked about Tyson and his bodyguard rushing out of the hotel at 4 in the morning with kind of this angry look on their face, Tyson reacted visibly, kind of shook his head and talked to his attorneys. That's the only emotion so far from Mike.
Is it your thinking that if that jury went out today, it were guilty?
Oh, I think if it went to the jury today, there'd be a decent chance of conviction. Now, we all know that no matter how well the prosecution does, it's very hard to convict. Right. I mean, having to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt is so tough.
Steve, what happened to the Tyson? You lived with Mike Tyson, didn't you?
Yes, well, Mike Tyson lived in my apartment for 3 years before he married Robin Givens. And
he was champ?
He was he was going to be champ, right. 1985, 1986, 1987.
How did you come to live together?
Bill Caton and Jim Jacobs, the managers of Mike Tyson, I worked with them, and I was the assistant manager. Bill and Jim felt that for a while, before Mike became an established businessman, that if he lived in my apartment, it would be better for him. It would be easier to relate to the fighter and keep an eye on him.
What was that like?
It was like having Mickey Mantle sleep on your couch every night, you know, or Willie Mays or Hank Aaron.
Was he easy to get along with?
Sensational.
Smart?
Sharp.
Sharp but not smart, but...
Smart in whatever area he wanted to be smart in. In other words, he's the greatest historian in boxing, but he doesn't care about computers.
All right.
In whatever area.
How about his dealings with women? Are you single?
I'm single.
All right, so you were two single guys
yes.
living in an apartment together. I guess you went out together.
We never went out together. He was his own man. He went to nightclubs out by himself. He went to musical concerts with women. He went to Brooklyn with women. He went to LA with women. Never did we go out together.
Did he bring girls to the apartment?
Many times.
Did you ever hear a girl complain?
There was never a problem in New York City. Not only that, the only problem he had was girls calling back, breaking their hearts. That was the problem.
The jury is sequestered, so they can't be affected by this show. What do you think happened in Indianapolis?
There's no way for any of us to know what happened in Indianapolis.
What do you think?
But the Mike Tyson that has been living with Don King for the last 3 years is not the Mike Tyson that lived with me in 1985, 86, 87. He's changed, and it's been a calculated change precipitated by Don King.
You think Don King has taken him from being a nice guy to not being a nice guy, from being nice with ladies to a possible rapist? A man could do this to another person?
No, not in that order. What he's done, very carefully, with calculation, he's put back the layers of hate, racism, disregard for other human beings that Customato peeled off over a 5-year period in Catskill, New York. All these things that only Don King, poisoning Mike's mind for a particular reason, not by accident, to sequester Mike, to control Mike, to get at his money.
Michael Marley, a boxing promoter turned boxing promoter who used to cover Mike Tyson, now a manager, used to be a writer. What's your assessment of Mike Tyson today?
Well, Larry, as an attorney, I wouldn't prejudge Mike Tyson's guilt or innocence. As Steve said, only two people truly know what happened in the room. But I would say this, Steve mentions racism. I don't know what that has to do with a case involving a black man and a black woman. But Mike Tyson's social history is dotted with some pretty bad incidents involving women. I don't think that Mike Tyson I knew as a journalist over these years is stupid enough to take sexual favors from a woman by force. I really don't believe that. I don't think Mike Tyson is dumb enough to risk his career and his chance to win back the heavyweight title. If he did it, they should lock him up and, you know, he should serve his sentence. And he should not be able to come back into the ring.
Michael, might this be a case like Palm Beach where the circumstances many people think indicate going willingly and then things getting rough?
Well, as the attorney who's covering the trial mentioned, that is going to be in the minds of the jury, although they're instructed that that has no legal bearing at all. The dispute here is nobody denies there was sex in that room 606 at the Canterbury Hotel. The only issue was there express or implied consent by the woman to have sex with Mike Tyson. And who knows? But I just don't think Mike Tyson, as Steve mentioned, has had women chasing him because he's young, he's famous, and he's incredibly wealthy. Whether it's in Los Angeles, New York, Indianapolis, women go after Mike Tyson. So I don't understand the rationale or the motivation for him to force himself upon a woman. If it happened, again, let the punishment fit the crime. But Mike Tyson really doesn't have to pursue women in that way.
We'll be right back with Dan Kaplan, Steve Lott, and Michael Marley. This is Larry King Live. We'll be including your phone calls. Judith Exner Tuesday, Senator Al Gore, and Gina Lollobrigida Monday night. Don't go away. Welcome back to Larry King Live with Dan Kaplis, the Denver attorney covering the trial in Indianapolis. Michael Marley, the boxing promoter who used to cover Mike Tyson for the New York Post, and Steve Lott, former roommate and business associate of Mike Tyson's, here at our studios in Washington. Dan, the defense's argument is, as they're asking questions, is going to be what? Are they going to say she knew what she was getting into when she went at that time of day to the heavyweight champion's room?
Yeah, Larry, that's a big part of it, but the other high-risk aspect to their strategy is they're kind of turning the tables on the prosecution. They're trying to use Mike Tyson's sexual level of activity in his favor. They're arguing that Mike is such a sexual athlete, that he's so active sexually and so renowned for that, that the accuser should have known that. So it's the defense that's bringing in evidence of...
And was that in their questioning today? That
it wasn't. Yes, it was, Larry, and it was very strong in opening statement where Vincent Fuller's counsel said that to the jury. He said the evidence will show that Mike's active sexually, and he said the evidence will show that Mike used this woman for sex, plain and simply, that she got mad about that and that she was smart enough and sophisticated enough to cook up this plan and pull it off for revenge.
Fuller's a terrific lawyer. In your estimation, how's he doing so far?
Oh, I think he's a brilliant lawyer, and he's the wrong lawyer to defend Mike Tyson.
Wrong lawyer?
I mean, oh, absolutely, Larry, and not taking anything away from him, but it's as if a spaceship landed on the interstate and a bunch of Washington, D.C. stuffed shirts walked out. He doesn't fit in this courtroom. Greg Garrison, the prosecutor, is a homeboy. He relates to the jurors. He gets right in their face. He's passionate. He is connecting with the jury. Vincent Fuller is not.
Mike, do you think Tyson fully realizes the seriousness of this, that he could well be, Mike Tyson could be behind bars?
I think Mike Tyson knows the import of this, Larry. I think not only behind bars, I don't think he'd ever be able to get back really into boxing, have the credibility. You know, poor Evander Holyfield is sitting out there. This $100 million fight was postponed because of a rib injury to Mike Tyson. Now Evander Holyfield is among those hoping and praying that Mike Tyson does not go to jail. But again, Mike Tyson, again, as Steve said, Mike Tyson is smart. He's street smart. He knows the history of boxing inside out. He also knows the history of gangland activities, the mafia, the mob, that type thing. So he's able to read and learn history, and he's fairly bright for a guy who really was educated only in reform school. So I think he's well aware.
Hey, Larry, if I may, I don't think Mike Tyson will go to jail if he's convicted. I think Mike Tyson is more likely to leave the country than to go sit in an Indiana jail cell for 7 of the prime years of his life. So I'll be very surprised if he ends up behind bars, no matter what the outcome of this trial.
Are you saying if found guilty, they won't, they'll let him out on appeal and risk that? You can't see a former heavyweight champion fleeing, do you?
Oh, absolutely. And I think the judge, I think the judge will allow him free on bond pending appeal. She doesn't think he's a flight risk. His bond right now is only $30,000. It's her routine practice to allow defendants free on bond pending appeal.
Steve, do you fear that? Do you think Mike Tyson would do that?
Well,
run?
I don't think Mike would run from anything, anybody, anytime. He's a terrifically courageous guy, but I'm afraid of what may happen out there. You know,
in prison.
Him going to jail would be so sad because it's not his fault. What people see now of Mike Tyson is not Mike Tyson. It's a reflection of Don King and the people Don has put around him. The same way that Mike Tyson was a reflection of Cus D'Amato, Jim Jacobs, and Bill Caton in 85, 86, 87. There's no magic about that.
But Don King didn't want Mike Tyson to go out and get a rape charge against him.
No, but in pandering to Mike, in allowing him to do things over and over, in telling him to do it, in placing people around, animals of the street, that say, Mike, you want that girl, you go take her. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for 3 years. He's reverted back to the way he was in the street. It's supposed to be like that because then Don has control. There's no way else for him to get control unless Mike is an animal. He didn't expect this, but it's happened.
Yeah.
Larry, let me say this. You know, I'm not going to defend Don King, but I have to say this. Mike Tyson is 25 years old now, and if anybody's responsible for Mike Tyson's social conduct, it's got to be Mike Tyson. On the other hand, you asked whether Tyson's aware of what going to prison could be all about. He need look no further than to Don King, who served time for manslaughter, 4.5 years, came out of prison and made himself the most successful promoter in boxing history. If anybody can tell him about the horror of jail, it's Don King.
Let me get a break. We'll come back and start including your phone calls. Then a major discussion on pornography. This is Larry King Live in Washington. We'll be right back. Let's begin including your phone calls. New Rochelle, New York. Hello.
Hello, Larry. Great show. I'd like to ask Mike's roommate if he feels what Robin Givens was saying in the interview with Barbara Walters is true, that he has the problem, the nervous problem, that he's liable to snap at any time when he gets aggravated.
Is that true, Steve? Absolutely not. Not true. Not true. Absolutely not. The only thing that was sad about the Robin Givens-Mike Tyson relationship is that Robin Givens drove Mike and everyone else absolutely berserk. And obviously, is there anyone on this planet who doesn't think that Robin Givens, from where direction she came? I mean, everyone knows by now. It's no question.
The direction was?
She was evil, period.
Really?
Oh, no question.
Chicago, hello.
Hi, Larry. I just think it's utterly absurd that Steve Lack can, just sit there and insinuate that Don King is the reason that of all Mike Tyson's problems. It just sounds like to me that this man is upset that Mike is no longer living with him, and, maybe the electricity might be cut off.
Good question. My response is, number one, I would love for Mike not to come back to me, but to get his own lawyer and his own accountant. I would love that. That would be the best thrill of my life. Number two, am I jealous? Yes, I'm jealous. They took our friend, my friend. They destroyed the greatest fighter I've ever seen and made a hero into a zero. What am I supposed to feel like?
East Orange, New Jersey. Hello.
Hello. Why is it, isn't it a possibility that Mike Tyson could be innocent? Just like you alluded to the fact that Magic Johnson was married when all America thinks he's a dirty animal. He was not married. What are you people doing to us? 63 years?
Nobody's saying he's guilty, and he hasn't gotten 63 years. That's what he can get. But he is obviously a person who's troubled. Wouldn't you say that, caller?
All right, troubled? Yes, he's troubled. But so is Bruce Ritter. So is J. Edgar Hoover. And you don't even talk about them.
And we've done shows on them.
No, you haven't.
Yes, we have. You going to tell me
what? Black people.
Okay. No, ma'am, you're wrong. Gardenia, California. Hello. Gardenia, California. Hello. Okay, I'm sorry. Maybe it's... Is this Gardenia?
Yes, hello, Larry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Larry, I'd like to say, first of all, that Bob Grant is the real king of radio. Howard Stern second. I
don't know either of them. Our guests are Michael Marley, Dan Kaplis, and Steve Lott. Our subject is Mike Tyson. Any, this is hard to do, Michael. Forecasts here. Is that possible? I guess we do that. We do anything with trials now. Michael?
Yeah,
what do you think's going to happen?
Larry, just one quick point. Steve Lott mentioned Mike Tyson having an independent lawyer or an independent accountant. Mike Tyson has never had his own attorney, not when he was with Jacobs and Caton. He had their lawyer. Mike Tyson, when he was under the control of Robin Givens and the mother-in-law, Ruth Roper, had their lawyer. Mike Tyson now has Don King's lawyers. That could be part of his problems, that he's never had anybody totally independent of an income derived from Mike Tyson. But getting to your point, let me say this. It would be ironic if Mike Tyson is knocked out of the ring by a woman who in size is a bantamweight. If the heavyweight champion's knocked out by a bantamweight, I don't think it will happen. I hope that Mike Tyson didn't do it. I believe that at least 1 out of the 12 jurors will harbor a reasonable doubt, and therefore we wind up, at the very worst, for Mike Tyson's view, with a hung jury. I doubt that the prosecution would seek to retry the case. I mean, Dan, if they can't get it on the first shot. And I think Mike Tyson will come back and be heavyweight champion of the world once again.
Dan?
I think it's clear that Vincent Fuller was hired by Don King. In fact, yesterday, Mr. Fuller at one point referred to Mr. Tyson as Mr. King, so obviously Don King is present in the courtroom to some degree. In terms of a hung jury, I don't see it at all in this case. Maybe a compromise verdict. Maybe he's not convicted on rape, but on one of the lesser charges.
Okay, what do you think is going to happen, Steve?
I don't know, but in Vincent Fuller, we've just battled Vincent Fuller for 2 years in federal court upholding our contract. We won a summary judgment. We found him to be very smart, and the proper word I've been asked to use, just as unscrupulous as Don King. So when Dan came on air saying that Vincent Fuller is out of place in Indiana, they won't know what hit them out there. He's from a different league and a different ballgame.
I bet he's won a lot of cases.
He's won a lot of cases.
That firm is a very prestigious firm.
Yeah, and for a ton of money, too.
Last call, Bristol, Pennsylvania. Quickly, hello.
Hi, I would like to know, my question is directed to Dan. Why do you think Mike has not hired all of the powerful guns that William Kennedy did down in Florida? It seems that he only has like maybe 1 or 2 lawyers handling it.
Oh, his firm is as big as the one, right, that was down there, wasn't it, Dan?
Yeah, let me make one point. I mean, the defense is incredibly well prepared. They're supremely intelligent. Their style just isn't right. The dynamics aren't right at all in this case.
We'll be hearing lots more about it and actually covering it on CNN. I thank all three of you very much. Thanks very much, Steve.
Thank you, Larry.
Thanks, Dan, and thanks, Michael. Michael Marley, Dan Kaplis, and Steve Lott.
Tonight, the alleged victim in the Mike Tyson rape trial took the stand for a second day today, but this time it was Tyson's lawyer asking the questions. Attorney Vincent Fuller did point out some discrepancies in the woman's testimony and her police report, but she stuck to her story that Tyson lured her to his hotel room and forced her to have sex. CNN's Jeff Flock has the story.
This woman, Mike Tyson's accuser, has now finished her testimony, and the damage has been done. Stung by graphic details of the alleged attack, Tyson spent the first round of his rape trial on the ropes. Friday, his defense attorney hit back. Vincent Fuller suggesting that the woman understood or should have understood the kind of relationship Tyson had in mind. Fuller asked about the Miss Black America beauty pageant events that Tyson had attended, where he met the woman. Did you hear him say to any of the girls, somebody's going to have to give it up? I'm willing, are you? No, replied the woman. Did you hear him say, I can't see your figure with your clothes on? What are you hiding under those clothes? No, replied the woman. Did you hear, you're a tall, black, beautiful queen who I'd like to have sex with? No, said his accuser. The woman did admit to poor judgment going to Tyson's hotel room here at the Canterbury at 2 a.m., but she said anybody can be fooled. I look back on it now and say, yeah, it was stupid, but that didn't give him the right to do what he did. Jurors have now seen evidence of the alleged attack. The yellow shorts outfit she was wearing, a picture of the bed where it is all said to have taken place. That, together with her testimony, say some, has put the defense on the defensive.
I think we're finding that Vince Fuller is betting on Mike Tyson. I think he feels, frankly, that Mike Tyson will tell a more believable story than this lady did.
And that may be a risky strategy. The 18-year-old Miss Black Rhode Island was challenged on why she didn't report the rape immediately. She said she was at first reluctant and wanted just to forget it. But then she testified her parents asked her if she thought she'd be able to live with herself if she didn't report it and it happened to someone else. No, she replied, I wouldn't. I'm Jeff Flock, CNN, Indianapolis.
Well, the trial will continue Saturday, and Tyson is still expected to testify in his own defense. He faces up to 63 years in prison if convicted of all charges.
Basketball heroics, the top sports story of Saturday was again in a court, Jim, and not on a court.
And much the same as the previous days, Tom. The trial of Mike Tyson continued in Indianapolis Saturday, and so did the damaging testimony supplied by the prosecution. Despite the judge's ruling in favor of the defense on one issue, it was still not a good day for the defense. Charlie Steiner heads up ESPN's crew covering the case.
Virginia Foster spent her 28th wedding anniversary as a star witness for the prosecution. The 44-year-old mother of two testified that she drove Tyson to the hotel in which the accuser was staying on July 19th. From the parking lot, Tyson called the accuser at 1:38 in the morning. Foster said that Tyson was pleading for the accuser to join him. Please, please, I just want to talk to you, she quoted Tyson. He was begging, like when a man is trying to get a woman to do something for him, so they beg and plead. Eventually, the accuser came down, and she and Tyson were driven to the Canterbury Hotel. Less than an hour after their arrival, Foster testified that the accuser emerged from the Canterbury and, quote, she might have been in a state of shock, a daze, frantic, disoriented. She seemed scared. In the 3-minute ride back to the accuser's hotel, Foster quoted the accuser as saying, I don't believe him. I don't believe him. Who does he think he is? As potentially damaging as that testimony was, it could have been much worse for the former heavyweight champion, because Judge Patricia Gifford would not let Foster testify that Tyson allegedly had exposed himself to her in the room of his bodyguard a day before the alleged rape. Prosecutor Greg Garrison told the judge with the jury out of the room, that state of mind is like fingerprint evidence. But Gifford ruled that prior uncharged conduct is not admissible under Indiana state law. While Tyson listened during the trial, he seemed restless. But as it has been through the week, his face showed no emotion. After 2.5 hours on the witness stand and relatively tame cross-examination, Mrs. Foster went home. And it's safe to say she'll never forget her 28th wedding anniversary. This afternoon, Dr. Thomas Richardson, the emergency room physician who attended to the accuser 24 hours after the incident, told the court that her internal injuries, quote, were consistent with a forced sexual contact or hard sexual intercourse. He also testified it is not unusual for a victim to report a rape a day or two or more after the incident. An expert OB/GYN witness, James Aiken from the University of Indiana, testified, quote, I have never seen this type of injury with consensual sex. The trial will resume at 9 o'clock Monday morning. A source close to the prosecution team says that Greg Garrison, the chief prosecutor, is ecstatic with the way the trial has gone through the first week. But Tyson and his defense attorneys get their chance next week. And this is ESPN's legal correspondent Jim Drucker joining us now. We always preface this by saying I'm not a lawyer, but it seems as if it's a fairly one-sided fight so far. It looks as if the prosecution has had its way through the first 3 days of testimony.
Well, especially the last 2 days, Charlie, they've just done a great job. They're backing up the accuser's story at every turn. If the accuser says she ran out of the hotel into the limousine and was upset, they bring out the limo driver to confirm that. If she says she ran out of the hotel room with her shoes in her hand, they bring out a bellman who's delivering room service to confirm that. So every step of the way, the prosecution has just done an A+ job at making her sound more credible by having other witnesses to confirm her story.
But what has struck me has been the cross-examination or lack of same by the defense team.
Well, it really hasn't been spectacular. In fact, in some cases, the cross-examination has helped the prosecution. When a doctor says that the injuries in her pelvic area more closely resemble a forced sexual act rather than consensual act, the prosecution witness is able to re-say it on cross-examination. However, one real important point, we haven't heard from the defense yet, and they're going to bring out a lot more on their own primary case.
And it looks like at this point it's almost a certainty that Mike Tyson's going to have to testify.
When the trial started, I was really thinking, well, maybe he won't have to. I have to say now, if Mike Tyson doesn't testify, I don't think there's any way in the world he can win.
That's going to do it for us for this first week of the trial. Of course, Monday morning, 9 o'clock, the case resumes here at the Marion County Courthouse. For Jim Drucker, I'm Charlie Steiner, ESPN. Let's go back to SportsCenter.
All right, if convicted on all counts, Tyson could face up to 63 years in prison. Charlie Steiner will continue reports on Sunday Sports Day regarding the trial. Tom?
Day in court, and testimony continued today. The rape trial of former heavyweight champ Mike Tyson, with the prosecution losing out on one element they were relying on, Tyson's other reported advances on women. Judge Patricia Gifford ruled that other alleged assaults, including one his limousine driver during the Miss Black America pageant last July, would be inadmissible. The driver, Virginia Foster, was one of the witnesses who took the stand today. CNN's Jeff Locke has more on today's testimony.
Ma'am, would you be willing to say anything at all?
Virginia Foster had a story to tell, but she wasn't allowed to tell it. Foster is the limousine driver who ferried Mike Tyson from stop to stop during his 36 hours in Indianapolis last July. She charges that before he allegedly raped this 18-year-old beauty pageant contestant, he attacked her. Foster made the claim in this appearance before the grand jury that indicted Tyson last summer, and prosecutor Greg Garrison sought to have the charges brought out here. Garrison told the judge that Foster would tell jurors that Tyson grabbed her, assaulted her, and exposed himself to her. Garrison says that 24 hours before the alleged rape, Tyson used the same ruse to get Foster to his room, that he wanted to talk to her. Then, Garrison charged, Tyson assaulted Foster.
Can you tell us that story now?
But Indiana law prohibits the jury from considering evidence of past uncharged crimes. So Foster was forced to keep silent and confine her testimony to events concerning the alleged rape victim. On that subject, she testified that from her limousine, she overheard Tyson make a cellular phone call to the alleged victim and heard him beg her for a date. And she said that when the woman later emerged from Tyson's hotel, she looked frantic, like she may have been in a state of shock. Foster said she was dazed, disoriented, and seemed scared. After that, the doctor who examined Tyson's accuser told jurors she had vaginal abrasions characteristic of rape victims. The defense team maintains the sex between the two was consensual and that the abrasions were the result of their heavyweight boxer client's larger than average anatomy.
Good night, Mike.
The first week, indeed the first round of this battle, is now over. Mike Tyson headed home with the increasing perception that in this battle he will have to administer the knockout punch with his own testimony. Jeff Locke, CNN, Indianapolis.
The trial is in recess and will resume Monday. Tyson faces up to 63 years in prison if convicted of all charges.
In day 6 of boxer Mike Tyson's rape trial, the judge blocked some testimony by another woman, Tyson's chauffeur. Prosecutors said she would have recounted how the boxer grabbed at her and exposed himself. She did testify the alleged victim was disoriented and scared after leaving Tyson's hotel. The ex-heavyweight champ says the 18-year-old beauty pageant contestant consented to sex. But 2 doctors testified Saturday abrasions on the woman were consistent with injuries caused by rape.
Sunday morning, Mike Tyson was to have attended a service at an Indianapolis church. The pastor had prepared a sermon on the topic of salvation, but Tyson never showed. Monday morning, 9 a.m., Tyson is back in court as the second week of his trial begins, with Marion County still making its case that the former heavyweight champion raped a Miss Black America contestant. Charlie Steiner and Jim Drucker are covering the Indianapolis trial.
The first week of the Mike Tyson trial has come and gone, and it's time for some impressions of the first week. And one of the first impressions is this stairwell behind me, which may have become the most famous stairwell in America. This is where Mike Tyson goes up and goes down to the battery of cameras and well-wishers every day of his trial so far. But as far as the trial is concerned, this, of course, Jim Drucker, our legal analyst. Jim, it's been striking so far how one-sided a fight it has been. The prosecution has just been raining one blow after another on Tyson and the defense.
Well, the prosecution has done a good job, Charlie, but I think too many people are watching L.A. Law and the old Perry Mason reruns, expecting the defense to be able to pound away at a witness and have them crack like the last 2 minutes of any episode. It really doesn't happen like that. But I would say the prosecution has made their point. They've told their story very effectively. And it's going to be up to the defense when they start their case in the week ahead to really pound home their side of the story.
We expect the prosecution to wrap up its case by midweek, and then the defense will get its crack. What do you expect the defense to do?
Well, I expect them to tell a slightly different version of the story, that yes, the woman came up to the hotel room, and all the other supporting witnesses, the defense will say they're all telling the truth. Yes, she ran out of the room upset. Yes, she ran into the limousine upset. But then they're going to change one facet of the story. For the 45 minutes to an hour that she was in the room, Mike Tyson's going to have to tell the tale that they were involved in activity and they were all agreeing to do it, and then she got upset and burst out. And it's going to be how truthful and how believable Mike Tyson is on the stand that might just turn the wheels.
That's the risky part, it would seem to me, of the Fuller defense strategy. Everything's going to ride on Mike Tyson's testimony.
Not everything, but a good deal, I would agree. But if one thing I've learned over the years is the game isn't over until the final out. It's certainly true in a legal case where you really do have to listen to both sides.
Just keep in mind one thing in this business of law. The prosecution has to win the game outright. All the defense has to do is beat the spread. For Jim Drucker, I'm Charlie Steiner, ESPN at the Marion County Courthouse in Indianapolis. Let's go back to Sports Center.
Okay, Charlie, the state should complete its case by Tuesday. The jury could get the case by next Saturday. Charlie will have reports Monday morning and as events warrant, and of course each evening on the Sports Center.
The trial of Mike Tyson is 1 week old in Indianapolis. The jury has been selected, 9 whites and 3 blacks, and the accuser has been heard. Do you think, Armin, that Mike Tyson is getting a fair trial, is capable of getting a fair trial?
I think he's getting about as fair a trial as he could hope to get. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like it's the kind of trial that's going to help Mike Tyson out in the long run. Just from her testimony and the things that were said yesterday by the limo driver, Mike Tyson's got a long, dark road ahead of him, I think, as far as this trial is concerned.
What's your reaction, Bill?
I think he's down 4-0 on all scorecards right now. He's further behind now than he was against Buster Douglas, and is going to have to take the stand. And if he takes the stand, I think we're sailing into uncharted waters.
This is an interesting thing because as a boxer, Tyson's best skill has hardly been defending himself, and this may all come down to, you know, William Kennedy Smith. But all the wisdom on that trial was he saved himself by being such a credible witness, and I'm not sure that Mike Tyson is going to be that kind of credible witness. They put him on the stand, and you know that Garrison, the prosecutor, is just going to be looking for the slip where he opens the door to his past alleged and you know, any kind of sexual misconduct or gender misconduct in the past. And you know, he's very lucky that a lot of that stuff has been thrown out already. I mean, the limo driver, as Garrison said yesterday, what she says occurred was like a fingerprint to what happened later on. And the more you see about this trial, you begin to think that if Tyson is not convicted of something.
But see, the difference between juries and us is that we're talking about that fingerprint, whereas the jury was not permitted to hear anything about that.
But I think with Fuller's case, I think at this point, and he's a brilliant attorney, though I don't quite see what we've seen of Fuller yet and his brilliance, is he's trying to push on the reasonable doubt of when she was supposedly, allegedly singing "Money, Money, Money," the talk of, well, he's got the talent, I've got the talent, he's got the money. If he can bring in some credible witnesses on cross-examination, or he brings to the stand that says, yes, she said that, yes, she was interested in Tyson's money, yes, she is a gold digger, quote-unquote, that to me is the only chance.
Everything we know about this girl, and I guess it's okay to call an 18-year-old girl, is that I just think that from the testimony, from what we know about her background, it's going to be very difficult for Fuller to paint this person as a gold digger.
And he's being very careful not to bash her.
Right. The one thing about Tyson going on the stand, though, is that certainly speaking, he does not come across quite as menacing as he does just looking at him.
Oh no, there may be some sympathy there, and you know, we can score this trial. You know, we can put him ahead or behind, or say the prosecution's winning or the defense is losing. But the fact is, it all may come down to whether or not these people will send a person this famous to jail. And you wonder if the evidence looks so much in favor of the girl at the end, you wonder who's ever going to come forward with these charges again.
How about if they bang him on the confinement issue and he just winds up going away for a couple of years? Or a year,
well, the interesting thing is, didn't he go into the grand jury with only one count against him and came out with 4? I mean, that's a very disturbing thing if you're Vincent Fuller.
I think Mike Tyson, before a grand jury, it was the precursor to what you might see with him on trial.
But he also, in the grand jury, came within 1 vote of not being indicted.
Right, but
but the fact is,
it's difficult when you put a man like Mike Tyson in front of a grand jury, as you've seen all this love and affection that he engenders in certain parts of the community in Indianapolis, to get a vote of 5-1. You know.
Speaking of votes, you know, for that prayer meeting yesterday that Jesse Jackson ran, I mean, he certainly has my vote because he's such a sincere guy.
You know, when you put Tyson on the stand, for all the good you may extract from him, he still subjects himself to cross. And you wonder how well he's going to stand up emotionally to cross.
Oh, I agree, but the fact is, they got to get somebody who's going to tell his side of the story.
Exactly,
now.
And he may be the only one that can do it.
My theory is that Vincent Fuller studied under Edward Bennett Williams, and Edward Bennett Williams once, in defending Jimmy Hoffa, had Joe Louis come into the courtroom and embrace Jimmy Hoffa, and as a result, or not as a result, a predominantly black jury acquitted Jimmy Hoffa. So I think that before this trial is over, he's going to try to get Bobby Knight to come into the courtroom and embrace Mike Tyson.
That may be like, do they have capital punishment?
I don't know. I don't know what I thought would happen the first week. It seems like this thing has gone very quickly, and you know, not having court TV.
Too, exactly. Without it being on television, I think has brought some semblance of sanity to this thing. Right, wrong, whatever. You can read about it. You're not subjected to it 24 hours a day on television.
There was one thing weird the other day when I was in the courtroom when they were picking the jury, and the judge is a woman, She was flanked by her two clerks, who are both women. The stenographer was sitting in front of her, who was a woman, and the two people who were questioning the prospective jurors were both women. And I figure Mike Tyson sitting there has got to think that maybe he's mistrusted.
Well, you get this. You got so spoiled in the sense of being a spectator during the William Kennedy Smith thing and the Clarence Thomas and Anita Hill thing that when the alleged victim had finished testifying, you know, I was calling the office the other day. Did Vincent Fuller shake her testimony? How did she stand up to Vincent Fuller? Because we were so used to seeing Roy Black against the world and the other.
Apparently, because of the rules of evidence that are permitted in that state, it's a lot easier to convict than it was in Florida.
We must take a break. When we come back, our panelists will have their parting shots.
After one day off, the trial of Mike Tyson entered its 7th day with more prosecution witnesses.
And more dramatic testimony heard today as well, Jim. After taking Sunday off, the real-life drama continued today in Indianapolis. The Mike Tyson trial resumed with the prosecution still making its case. And as I said, dramatic testimony was again heard from witnesses. Tyson appeared a bit more upbeat when he entered the courthouse this morning for day 7 of his trial. The former champ even managed to sign an autograph or two. As you know, Tyson is accused of raping a Miss Black America beauty pageant contestant, and Charlie Steiner reports that 2 more contestants from that pageant took the stand today.
Stacey Murphy testified that she detected something was wrong with the accuser at a dance rehearsal for the Miss Black America pageant later in the morning of July 19th. Murphy said, "People say a look says so much, but this look said it all. She was talking with her soul. It was like she was a zombie." Under cross-examination by attorney Lane Hurd, the defense seemed to be revealing its strategy, that Tyson's behavior was something less than angelic during the pageant. Murphy testified, he was like an octopus. He was grabbing the girls and feeling them while posing for pictures. He'd be holding one girl, reach over and touch the breast of another. Another pageant contestant, Charisse Nelson, quoted the accuser as saying, "I was with Mike Tyson last night. He raped me." Nelson also testified, the way she was talking, something was wrong. She was in a trance, like waiting for someone to wake her up. Earlier in the day, police detective Thomas Kuzmic testified that a sequin from the accuser's outfit worn in the early morning of July 19th was discovered in Tyson's hotel room 3 days later. With the outfit already having been sent back to Rhode Island before the investigation began, Kuzmic testified that he asked the accuser's father to remove some other sequins and send them back for further investigation. The sequin on the floor matched those on the outfit. And a forensic scientist, Mohammed Tahir, testified that blood and saliva were found on the underwear of the accuser. The state is trying to show that the blood came from the pelvic abrasions the accuser suffered. As potentially damaging as some of the testimony was to Tyson's case, the defense began sprinkling doubts about questionable police work and a behavior pattern by Tyson that should have been a warning signal to the accuser. This was Tyson's best day in court so far, or at least the least damaging, which is why he seemed to be happy as he left the courthouse. And for some, he still remains a hero. Joining me now, ESPN legal correspondent Jim Drucker. Jim, and for the first time, it looked as if the defense showed some signs of life in this trial.
It really did, Charlie. I guess watching LA Law finally works a little bit for the defense. 2 or 3 impressions I got that were just amazing. Number one, the woman accuser never for 3 days mentioned that any portion of her clothing were ripped. Now later, weeks later, she does. So that came out today that in the first 2 or 3 days, she never mentioned it. Number two, what came out very clearly is that other contestants in the beauty pageant did not give Mike Tyson their phone number or hotel room number, where she did. And just step by step, every prosecution witness, for example, even the police officer who first interviewed her at the hospital, says that her behavior was consistent with that of a rape victim. Yet on cross-examination, it becomes somewhat clear when they ask her, aren't you also familiar with people who say they've been raped and then days later change their minds that there wasn't? So those were the types of impressions that I got.
But also, there were 2 more beauty pageant contestants who painted less than glowing reports of Mike Tyson.
Mike Tyson is never going to win a National Organization for Women award, that's for sure. But yet with those two other beauty contestants, the impression I think that some people might have gotten was that those two contestants were so mature, so much older than the accuser, who may have overplayed the naive young ingenue a little bit too much.
On Tuesday, there are going to be two more witnesses, the accuser's mother and the 911 operator, and then we will hear that dramatic 911 tape we told you about last Thursday. One other note, during the lunch recess, Mike Tyson was signing autographs in the courtroom to some of the people who had lined up for tickets to watch the case. Said Mike Tyson to one of the autograph seekers, "I'm going to win. I always win." Let's go back to Sports Center.